Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another edition of the Peak Fiction Podcast today. And as always, I've got the good brother, my guy, the man who's experienced so much greatness. And I feel like I've said that almost every single time that we've come on here, but legit within the most recent stretch of since we last had an opportunity to talk. My dog has experienced a lot of greatness, and so AJ, man, how are you feeling? And holy sweet mother of Flagnars, dude, it's just good to see you, dog.
Yeah, I'm great. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be talking about all this stuff. It feels like it's been a while since the last one. And yeah, you're right. I feel like every time we say the same thing, but I really am lucky to be experiencing all the stuff that I'm experiencing and be able to talk about it with you. Yeah, I'm really excited. Thanks for having me again.
Let's go, yo. Let's go. So, without further ado, well, before we continue, audience is gonna get inside look into this. You're recording, right?
I'm recording.
Your side. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, our first topic here today. I told AJ before we started here, I was like, bro, I want to catch you off guard with this first topic because I don't want to give you any preparation. You know what I'm saying? Because it's something that I think both of us are really passionate about, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on the recent events in my beloved Akane Banashi.
Oh,
this series that I have been enjoying so much. Honestly, it might end up being my favorite manga of the year, just in terms of the stuff that I've been experiencing the most. One Piece aside, obviously, because I'm too biased towards that. But I feel like the other manga that's been rent free the most this year for me on a weekly basis has been Akane Banashi, and so I really wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you about this manga. What are your thoughts on it? What are the things that you like about it? And just your experience with Akane Banashi so far, because I feel like I almost never get an opportunity to talk about this series, but it's always in my thoughts.
yeah. I was wondering what the surprise was going to be, and I'm so glad it's this because you're so right. I tweet about it. I talk about it on stream. I try to spread the word as when I can. I talk about it in my Discord server. I really, it's such an incredible manga, but for whatever reason, I think it doesn't get the attention it deserves. So I was really glad when you got on it, and I'm really glad you devoted a little section to it. Yeah, it's been one of my highlights of the year as well. I don't remember exactly when I caught up, but I've been reading all of 2024, and yeah, it's honestly wonderful because. Correct me if I'm wrong. You haven't watched Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinju, right?
No, and that's exactly what I wanted to get your thoughts as someone who has watched that series.
Right. Yeah, because we talked about it last time and you hadn't, but I was just making sure you still hadn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, without getting into spoilers much for that one of the beautiful things about Rakugo is, if there is a story about Rakugo, it is inherently a story about stories, a story about art, a story about all the facets that make up art, and as a result, I think just having Rakugo as a centerpiece of your story makes it a story about life in general and how art and life are intertwined. And so what I love about Rakugo and why it's one of my favorite stories of all time, Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinju, is just about how it is sort of this tapestry of life and art and all the beauty and passion and human flaws, the human rawness, the flaws, the regressions, the progressions, everything that goes into these people that dedicate their hearts and souls to this incredible art. And yeah, I won't get into it. It's an amazing character piece, but it can be very. It isn't a shonen. Let's put it that way. So to have Akane Banashi come out, tackle Rakugo, and tackle a lot of similar themes. There are literally exact same stories in Akane Banashi that are in Rakugo, because they pull from the same pool of Rakugo stories. But it has a whole different complexion. It has this shonen spirit to it through our wonderful main character, Akane, and how she just is so relentless in her drive. She is the true epitome of shonen main character, just applied in a sort of for shonen unfamiliar, I guess, premise. But yeah, seeing her journey and her progressions and regressions and her insecurities with her father and how she idealizes him and then realizes maybe I've grown past that and all that sort of thing. And then all her, I guess, her teammates and her antagonists or sort of rivals in the trade, and all the like Isho, incredible character Isho.
Yes,
All the
so good.
Is incredible. I think him and Akane are my two favorites. And all these people and how it all coalesces in this thing that is just indicative of passion and art and everyone pouring their soul into it, and how it means different things for different people. It really captures the sort of sports anime thing. It's similar to Haikyuu in a lot of ways, but it's totally its own thing. It's just amazing. It's just so good. And the art as well, some of the spreads of some of the more...
Oh, man.
Some of the spreads of some of the more grotesque Rakugo stories, for example, are so evocative. Actually, some of them remind me of certain Bleach spreads we might be talking about later. And just it's just a beautiful story. And the current stuff in the manga, actually, like the past 4 or 5 chapters and what's going to continue from here, I think is my favorite part so far. This flashback stuff we're doing. So yeah, it's amazing, and I've rambled about it too long. Now I want to hear what you think.
I needed that. You have no idea. I truly needed that because, first of all, I completely agree. I think the stuff we've gotten in the last 15 and 20 chapters has been the best stuff in the series, and I think that is saying something considering how consistently good it's been throughout the course of its entire run. I think this series is really special in a lot of different ways, but I think you hit the nail on the head in regards to comparing it to a sports series. It reminds me so much of peak Haikyuu, peak Chihaya Furu in regards to how I feel after reading a chapter. Like after reading an Akane chapter, I really it's kind of like how I felt upon experiencing Look Back. Which you just recently finished that as well, right? The anime adaptation. Yeah,
I read the manga beforehand, but I watched the anime just last week.
Okay, yeah. So after finishing that, it was sort of like a reminder of why we create art, regardless of what it is, whether it's writing or creating YouTube videos or Twitch streams, whatever it is, right? That we do. It was a good reminder of why it is that we do the things that we do, and it was a beautiful thing. And I feel like I get those, what I felt coming out of the Look Back, I get on a pretty consistent basis, coming off of Akane Banashi. And I think one of my favorite chapters of the year, actually, is chapter 120 and 121 together. 120 is whenever she goes around with Sensei, just around Shibuya, and he's introducing her to all of his interests. So there's horse racing, and there's listening to music, and there's basically everything that doesn't have to do with Rakugo that eventually has an influence on his Rakugo. And it's so beautiful because there was actually a line in there that really stuck out to me where he says, "In the world of art, you never know what will fulfill the soul."
I love that line.
You can't go wrong by trying out new things.
Yeah.
And I think that encapsulates not just Rakugo, but why these stories hit as hard as they do in regards to the stories about stories that take so much influence from other things that could potentially influence someone while they're creating these things. Just recently, I've been playing Dragon Quest 3, the HD 2-day remake. And this is the first time I've ever played Dragon Quest 3, and I see the DNA of Hunter x Hunter here. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about it because it's, once again, when you get to experience what inspires someone to create something you love so much, it hits different. It hits really, really different. So going through these chapters and seeing what inspires him, and then proceeding to see how it inspires her, to then have both of them perform Rakugo in the ways that only they can. So Akane goes and she does it in her own specific voice and style, and then followed by her sensei doing the same exact thing. And the ways in which that performance resonates with the audience in completely different ways, yet it's still, both of them are still experiences that the audience is never going to forget, is just something that I love so much, because it shows that you can be inspired by things, come out of it, and how you then propel that to the next person, how the inspiration affects you, and then you take that It's sort of like a lightning technique where you absorb the lightning, then shoot it out the other hand. How that comes out is dependent on the voice of the individuals delivering that. And seeing it from both Akane and her sensei back to back, and then of course now getting the flashback that gives insight into what created the world that we know to be as Akane Banashi, kind of like their own Void Century flashback. It's just been such a great part of this series that I feel not only touches upon what makes the story so special, but also captures the themes of the series very, very well. And I think Akane Banashi does a great job in general of constantly reminding the reader like what the major themes of the series are, why these characters are doing what they're doing. But with the stakes being so high right now, and I love how you compared it to the Shonen Battle manga as well with Akane, we're at the point where she's about to learn Bankai, or she's about to learn Gear Second, or Sage Mode, or like she's right on the precipice of that.
Right.
And we're getting the moment that you would normally get in like one of those series where they meet up with a sensei and the training happens. We're seeing that happening right now. And it's just like you get what you love out of those types of series, while also getting what you love out of your slam dunks, your Shiafudas, and Haikyuu. And I think that's what's causing Akane Banashi to be not only just a really nice breath of fresh air in the magazine, but a necessary story to have within Shonen Jump right now, considering I think it's in the most unique place it's ever been with all the variety of different stories that are in it. But it's such a classic Shonen Jump series that also feels so new, that showcases that you can do the classic Shonen Jump formula right still. And I love it so much for that, because it's working within its restrictions and creating something new and beautiful. So I love Akane Banashi, and I'm so glad you like it too, bro.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up that chapter, because when I'm talking about the recent stuff and how it's been so great, I'm thinking primarily of the big flashback revelations that we're getting. But that chapter is so good, and the line you mentioned is one of my favorites. It absolutely stuck up to me the first time I read it. And yeah, so like just to repeat, in the worlds of art, you never know what will fulfill the soul. You can't go wrong by trying out new things. That reminds me of two things. Well, that line specifically reminds me of one thing, and the chapter reminds me of another story we've talked about. So the first thing is, that line to me is Nishinoya Haikyuu. Like, you never know what will fulfill the soul, you can't go wrong by trying new things. That's his entire mantra, and I think Nishinoya in Haikyuu is one of the biggest personifications of one of the main themes, which is just... or rather, a lot of people expected him, when the series was coming out, to he had to go into volleyball because he was one of the best players we've seen. But life, he was a free soul. He was a free spirit who just went wherever the wind blew him. And then he was kind of like purely instinctual and animalistic. And what he viewed as fulfilling was entirely different from anyone else. But they are all cut from the same cloth. They're all monsters in their own way. And that's a huge part of Haikyuu, and that's, again, part of the reason I feel like these two series are very similar spiritually. And then the chapter in general, the way you mentioned beautifully of showing Akane around and showing her what's impacted him and what she can take from it, that reminds me a lot of the end of Metal Gear Solid 2, of passing on the important things to the next generation. And yeah, there's a lot of things that can be lost in translation. There's a lot of things that are worth lamenting in the world. But here are the things that are of value, and I'm going to pass them on to you. This is what it means to me. You take with it what you will, but I think it's important to pass it on. And yeah, so it's just so... this story tackles so many things that are present in a lot of my favorite stories. We've talked about a bunch of them just now, but it does it in such a fresh way that pays homage, but is also totally its own thing. So yeah, I can't wait to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. I think we're in a part of the story where, even though this year has been so strong, I feel like next year has potential to be just as strong, if not stronger, considering how the series has been presenting itself up until this point, and it's been such a beautiful thing. I mean, looking at the series that you just compared it to Haikyuu felt the same way. So there's no way it can top itself, and it kept doing that until the finale.
Yeah.
So, hopefully, Akane Banashi can be the same way. But going into something else, something that is not so consistent. As a matter of fact, the opposite of consistency, since our beloved Sir Alex left, we're going to be talking about Manchester United.
I thought you were talking about One Piece at first. I'm like, huh?
Oh man, listen, man. So before we get into the rest of the greatness, I just want to dedicate this segment to the future of Manchester United. I feel like we're at a point in time right now where both of us as fans. I'm so glad that you recommended this as a topic of discussion, because obviously during the international break I've been constantly thinking about what's going to happen when we get back. We're on a pretty good run right now. I think Rude did a phenomenal job as an interim manager to really get everybody ready and start delivering some W's across the leagues. But I think the one thing that I feel right now is just momentum, and I'm optimistic towards what we have coming in the future. What I'm hoping, before I pass the floor over to you in regards to this topic, is that we don't start getting too trigger happy with some of the trades. I feel like we have such a good core that if we continue to work on the strong core, I'm looking at up front, right? Like when I'm thinking of Rasmus Højlund, when I'm thinking of Rashford and Garnacho, and what we're building there in the center with Bruno and Mainu and Ugarte, I just hope that we keep our key pieces and we continue to develop the youngsters that have been doing so well, that just need that extra bit of oomph of experience to their game to really elevate them to the next level. And so I hope that Ruben Amorim will be the one that will take us to that next level, because I do think we have a strong enough core. Our defense has been pretty... It's been like great and then not great throughout the year, but I have trust in the boys back there. And Lisandro's amazing, and Diogo, and we're going to do our thing back there. And of course, Onana's been masterful in a lot of games. But in regards to our front, I strongly believe, as long as we stay healthy, that if we stick with that core, I don't want us to get too trigger happy with the upcoming potential roster changes and stuff. I think we have a really good thing going. So let the boys continue this momentum. Hopefully Højlund can turn into the striker that we all want him to become. And I strongly do believe that we keep Garnacho in there and magic will continue to happen. That man has been he's been incredible for us this year, even though he's had a couple of one-offs, but who hasn't on this team? But I feel like there's a lot of magic to be had. That I feel like, even though we definitely look better than last year, and I'm so happy for that. That I for some reason I feel optimistic. I don't feel super down on what could potentially happen now with this new manager coming in. And obviously, it's because of the pedigree and what he did for Sporting, and of course the lasting impression of beating City 4-0, which was like let's go. But I just feel like we have the core pieces, man. But I wanted to pass it on to you, bro, because it's been a wild year, obviously coming off of a super high at the end of last season, and then this season started off horrendously. So thoughts on the season so far, and the things to come here with our brand new manager.
Yeah, so I guess there are two things I want to, I guess, address with that. So firstly, I'll actually answer your question with a question really quick first. How did you feel at the end of last season when we won the FA Cup, and then it was like a will they, won't they keep Ten Hag? What did you have any thoughts on what you wanted to happen at that point with the manager?
At that point, I wanted to stick with Ten Hag because I believed that, like I was just talking about in regards to our core, I believed that he was setting something up there that truly felt special. and I think that's why I wanted to stick with the manager coming off of the FA Cup. It could have been an emotional thing. I wasn't really thinking logically, but I was thinking with in regards to at least our core, the core I was just talking about.
Okay, yeah. So it's been such a weird year, man. It's been such a weird 10 years, the last, like, since 2013. It's been so weird. But I guess my thoughts overall is, because it goes back to that time. I think last year was an awful year in terms of league placement. We won the FA Cup. That was a great memory that'll be immortalized, and those are memories that will, like, that it shouldn't be understated how important that is. Those memories, those nights out at Wembley, where you get silverware and beat City. But prior to the FA Cup, I was just like, I felt like he had to go. And then we won it, and then I got emotional too, and I felt, okay, I still think he needs to go, but if we have these new owners that have been coming in over the past few months, they're lots of good people. These are football people, which we haven't had, like, maybe ever in this way. So if they decide after this they're going to stick with him, I will just put my full trust in them, and I'll look at the positives, and that'll be fine. So they kept Ten Hag ultimately. And I went, yeah, the injuries were awful. That's true. So maybe with a settled squad, with a proper new coaches, new management, everything, he has the platform. It started out pretty well. Like, the first game against Fulham, we got a last minute, or a goal in the last 10 minutes or so, and people were like, it's just like Wolves last year, but the performance was way better than Wolves. And I'm just like, something's building. Like, this is good. It went bad again, and now here we are with the longest international break of my life. I'm so glad it's done now. But ultimately, my general feelings are quite optimistic, honestly. And we got to the point where last year I was the most detached from football, soccer, football, that I've been ever, because it's just been 10 years of getting hope for a new manager, being optimistic, and then ultimately it goes to hell after a year or two. And it's just the same cycle over and over. But we do have a whole new structure, new ownership, and a new everything in place, and they've got their guy. And ultimately I've been to sort of transition into the squad. I'm very optimistic about Ruben Amorim. I think he talks the talk. So far, he walks the walk. I think we should give him lots of time, allow him to implement his vision. But the thing about that I'm really optimistic about, which is something I agree with you about, is that they've been briefing that he believes in the players much more than anyone else in the press seems to. Yeah. That he's not going to have a huge overhaul in the squad. Definitely not in January. He's not going to do much. They're not going to do much. I don't think there will be huge turnover, unless it's a huge disaster until the summer, but I don't think it will be. Because I agree, like, this summer was actually quite a bit of turnover. We got rid of a lot. We brought in 5 first-team players, and 4 out of 5 of them, I think they were great buys. And the fifth is Xerxes, which the jury's out for me. Like, no player has, he came into such a difficult position. He had some 100%. Good games, some bad games, whatever. No player has looked good in the last, 2 to 3 years for us consistently, except maybe Kobe or something. So I have a lot of faith in the squad. I totally agree with you, and I think that the new coach does as well. The way he's talked about them. And I think his new shape, his new formation will complement it really well too. I'm really excited to see Yoro in it. I think he's going to go. He might not. We're recording this to the night before the game against Ipswich. I don't know if he's going to start right away, but I think if not tomorrow, then pretty damn soon he's going to be straight into it. Shaw is back. Hopefully he doesn't get injured. I think Mount. He really seems to be his sort of player, so I hope he doesn't get injured as well. You mentioned Garnacho. I have a lot of faith in him. I need these players to stop reading social media because,
please.
No, I think the squad's great. I really do. I think all you need to do is tinker with it a little bit. Maybe a wing back in the summer. Maybe a center mid for depth if we get rid of Eriksson or Casemiro. Maybe an extra defender because we have 3 center backs probably. But other than that, like, I'm a big fan of it. I'm a huge fan of Højlund. I think his first season was way more impressive than anyone talks about.
Definitely.
If you look at the way we played, he got like no chances. He was hardly involved in the game, not because he was playing badly, but because the team's style just never suited him. It never complimented him at all. And whenever he got chances, he finished them so well. I'm a big fan of Ahmad as well. I think he's
Me too.
I think he's great. I think he's amazing.
Fantastic.
So I hope he has the platform to perform too. So yeah, I think the squad's great, honestly. I don't think we're going to win the title with these players, but I think it's one of the better squads in the league, way better than the league position shows. A mix of everything. Mix of youth, good experience, players in their prime, great center backs. They just need to get an identity and vision together. Precisely. And I think that's what Amorim's here to do. So hopefully it goes well. But I'm optimistic. Like I'm thinking long term too. Even if we tie or lose tomorrow, I'm willing to be patient and not be doom and gloom.
Absolutely.
I'm totally in for it, and I'm totally invested.
Yeah, no, same here, dude. I'm so glad that you brought up Ahmad, because that has been a shining star in this past year, and not only just in big games, but when we need him in anything. I don't care if it's a flipping League Cup match or a season match, a league match. I don't care what it is. Any time that he's in the game for a prolonged period of time, I'm just like, that's the United way of play that I love. Like, it's always forward. It's so smart, and I really, really love watching him play. And so glad you brought him up. And to talk about a few of the players you talked about or referencing earlier, I've been loving what De Ligt has been doing all year. He's been fantastic, and Mazraoui as well.
Oh, Mazraoui's so good. Yeah,
fantastic, dude. I'm so glad you talked about them, because I forgot to talk about them, and man, they've been great. But with the United greatness on the horizon, we also have other greatness to look forward to. Of course, just like the international break has felt like the longest ever, this Oda break has felt like the longest ever. Considering we've had one chapter in the past like 6 weeks, and obviously that. Similar to what was going on back in Dressrosa in 2014, we had a lot of breaks because Oda was, of course, sick, and he had tonsillitis, if I'm not mistaken, at the time. He was obviously not 100%. And he was still delivering as many chapters as he possibly could, because God bless him, and his work ethic. But it appears that he's recovering, and I'm so glad to finally be able to have him back, because I know he's more excited to write Elbaf than any of us are to read it. This is definitely, we talked about obviously how much he's set up for the future of the series, and for him to finally be able to write the arcs that he's been wanting to write the whole series, where Fishman Island and Wano, now Elbaf, and then after that'll be Laugh-Tale, or what we assume is going to be Laugh-Tale. He's been setting up so much of this stuff for so long that I know he is much more excited than any of us could even imagine to finally be putting this stuff onto the page. And so with his return coming in soon, and then obviously I think we'll be in the Shonen Jump like 2 to 3 week break somewhere after that soon. It'll give us a good opportunity to really think about the future of the series. So I just want to ask thoughts on end of Egghead, beginning of Elbaf, and what's incoming, man, because there's been so much greatness, AJ. Like, for both of us being Emu fans, fans are being fed. Emu fans are being fed. Emmett is so, I love you so much, Emmett. I don't know if there's I can't express the amount of love I have for Emmett and Joy Boy and everything happening there, as well as obviously Kuma and Bonnie. But I was just so not even surprised. I was pleasantly just satisfied and fulfilled by Emu throughout not only just all of Egghead. I'm talking from him going in Lelucia, in the Lucia incident, to what happened in the Reverie intermission stretch in the arc, to what happened after with the reveals and then taking out Garcia Saturn. It's just, Emu, I love you. So I have to ask AJ once again, thoughts on the end of Egghead. Elbaf, obviously, Loki season. Great. I love the beginning of this arc, and it's been off to such a great start. As a massive Nami fan, I've been eating super good. But thoughts on the greatness, on the One Piece greatness.
So end of Egghead pretty much is a continuation of what I think of most, like the rest of Egghead. I think it's awesome. I think Egghead in general is such an interesting arc because there really isn't any there really isn't any arc like it in One Piece. No, I guess proper arc, because what I'd say is Wano is an amazing arc. It's in the conversation for my favorite in the series, but I think in structure it's very similar to Skypiea. There are arcs that are alike one another, and there are defining traits within these sort of self-comprehensive arcs with their internal narratives. Whereas Egghead feels like some of the lore piece chapters, or the post-Enies Lobby, or the Reverie chapters, just extended to a however many chapter long arc it is, 70 chapters, whatever it is, which sounds like a really risky thing to do, because it is. Egghead to me isn't really about a self-comprehensive narrative and story within. It's kind of like a cavalcade of intermingling thematic notes and character stories and flashbacks, and just it's almost like a transitionary arc in a lot of ways to set the stage for the rest of the final saga. And it does that beautifully because it fleshes out a lot of the characters that need to be fleshed out, so that when they get payoff at the end, it hits as hard as it can. So like the stuff it does for Kizaru and for Garp and Kobe and Akainu and just like Kuma and Bonnie and Vegapunk, like all these characters that were great before, but get properly fleshed out in a way that's that makes them, I guess, more rich. All of that was so needed, I think, because I think it's just a great prioritization to use this arc to flesh out all those characters and have it work in such a cohesive way, so that it was still an arc and a story being told in a way that flowed. So yeah, the ending of Egghead, I was a huge fan. I know it's kind of controversial. To me, none of the negatives anyone really said factored in for me. I just really loved it the whole way through. It's one of my favorite arcs in the series. And speaking of Emu, yeah, I think I mentioned, I may have mentioned, I think it was to you on a podcast in the past, that a lot of Emu's introductory stuff, from Reverie into Wano into, like, I guess the beginning of Egghead, was very similar to the Obito Toby phase, yes. The Toby phase for Obito, where where Toby and then Emu were kind of like a force of nature and a horror movie villain in a way. Not too deep, but just really full of aura and hooks and mystery and mystique. And that was great. That was great for the first phase of Emu. But now we're getting into the point where we got to see the man behind the mask for Toby/Obito, and we're getting to know Emu. And the more we get to know of them, the more we see parallels and insecurities and the way that they were so traumatized and shocked and weak. They looked weak. Just at the last fragments of Joy Boy, of the hockey, really struck me. They are, despite seeming so inhuman in their control and aura and all of that beforehand, they are so human in showing their fragility, and in a lot of ways very childlike in their weaknesses, and just through some of the ways that they just interact with others. Like, I think there are big parallels between Emu and Luffy's sort of childlike nature, just a very dark complexion of it. So I love all of that, humanizing Emu, deepening Emu and making them a proper character now, not just this magnificent force of nature. I've been loving it, and any little bit I can get, I'll eat up. And then, so yeah, Egghead was amazing, and I think it does some fantastic stuff with Vegapunk that I could just talk forever about. But then we get to Elbaf, and I've really enjoyed that too. Just the first 3 chapters, I think it was, were so nostalgic, so simplistic. Yes. It was the East Blue Crew. It was just hijinks and adventure, and we had Nami and Usopp doing their buddy comedy stuff.
Yes.
It was so great. It was so great because for balance, that is so needed after Egghead, which is
100%.
Egghead is so different from the beginning of One Piece, whereas these chapters at the beginning of Elbaf were so like the first chapters of One Piece. So it was great to just balance things out, reset the tone, and just be nostalgic and offer a lot of great minimalistic, simple character moments that were really evocative of the first arcs of One Piece, but also giving us a lot of really interesting symbolic, thematic depth to chew on through showing us a lot of things about, in this land, what the sun god represents, and kind of alluding to a lot of allegorical stuff.
Definitely.
Which I really appreciated. And then Loki, oh my gosh, just meeting Loki and the sheer presentation and the little bits of characterization in the interactions with Luffy in 1131, the allusions to a relationship with Shanks and the mysteries about why he's actually there and what it means to actually amass the power that it would seem he believes a god has, the perceptions of a god, and all that sort of thing. And also, I don't know if I brought this up to you, but I think Elbaf is going to be very kind of how the first few chapters were. I think Elbaf as a whole is going to just be a huge parallel to a lot of the earlier arcs in a lot of ways. I think a lot of characters that we haven't seen in a while could come back in this and play a big role. I don't necessarily think it will definitely happen, but I see the potential for sure, just through the allusions to early One Piece that there is, and specifically that big spread of Elbaf, where we see the tree at the end of 1130. It looks a lot like Skypiea to me. The shrubs and the leaves look like the different layers of the clouds on Skypiea. Yes. And I don't think that's unintentional at all. I think that's very deliberate. And I think that in a lot of ways, this arc, kind of like Wano did, could really, again, be another arc that mirrors Skypiea, specifically through, I think, how it's going to tackle the idea of a god, and Skypiea was one of the arcs that big time did that through NL. So just generally, those are just some theories rattling around, but generally so far, I'm so excited. To have caught up with the series now feels like a blessing, because it's like, it feels like there's never been a better I don't know, maybe I'm full of crap, but maybe it feels like there's never been a better time to be up to date and experiencing the series. So I've been loving it. So
I saw that clip of you reacting to Bang's Robin again. I just got to hear your thoughts on Bang's Robin.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Man, I've constantly gone on record. Some people criticize Robin's character arc post Enies Lobby because it feels kind of stagnant, and that she doesn't get much spotlight and she doesn't get much action and stuff like that. I couldn't disagree more. Primarily because she's had the vast majority of her life has been running away, trauma, fear, and the moment where she comes into her own and finally decides that she wants to live and she deserves to live and she deserves to open herself up to connection with this new family of hers, that's when she properly starts living.
Precisely.
And so I've gone on record to say that Robin, after Enies Lobby, can literally just vibe the whole series, and I would be fine with it. You can't do that with every character. Obviously, you can't do that with every character, but with Robin, Robin specifically, that's the one character I'd be happy with that for, because of all that she's gone through, to just see her just take part in these adventures, smile, learn about the world, take part in her passion, continue to build these bonds with her beautiful family, and just smile, just do her thing, smiling beautifully in the background of these panels. That's all I needed for Robin, and she still would have been one of the best characters in the series. But she's had more than that. She's been brilliant in Wano. She's had some really cool stuff in Egghead. And now she's getting this great stuff at the beginning of Elbaf, which I guess I'm starting to think about the Saul stuff now, which is, again, a very controversial thing. For me, no problem with it whatsoever. Nothing is invalidated. If I can go on a tiny tangent, because the thing with that is fake out deaths in series, I get it. I don't like them all the time either. In One Piece, there are examples of me not liking it. I think it's done poorly in some places. This is not an example of that for me, because
Agreed.
What is Saul's purpose in the story? When Saul dies in the flashback in Ennie's lobby, are we crying because we truly learned about this guy through hundreds of chapters and properly know him as a person, watched him grow, and are crying because we are crying primarily for him? In my opinion, that's not the case. In my opinion, the reason we cry for him is he has a great introduction and we like him a lot. But we're crying because of what it means for Robin and her past.
Yes.
We're not crying because we're not sad at his death because we know Saul and we've seen him through hundreds of chapters, and for him we're grieving. Obviously it's sad, but it's for Robin and what it meant for her and the tumultuous experience she's had. So when you think of it that way, him being alive, nothing's invalidated at all. Robin still went through 20 years of trauma after that. None of that is erased. None of that's gone. None of that's erased. Robin still went through all of that. Every single thing. Nothing's invalidated. And then it almost feels to me like her mother died. The whole island died. Like, it was a horrific tragedy. It almost feels to me that Oda is sort of symbolizing that Robin's ability to keep pushing forward when everything seemed, the world just seemed to tempt her to give up. That perseverance to see light in the world is in a way being rewarded through Saul being alive.
Yes.
It doesn't invalidate. Yeah, it doesn't invalidate the entire tragedy. It doesn't invalidate anything because she still went through it all. And there's this beautiful sort of thing at the end. Now, we did have a chapter end with Oda trolling and going, Saul's fallen down and he's I think that's just a red herring. I think he's going to be fine and they got to meet. But that's why that moment means so much to me. That's why I freaked out seeing her nostalgic hair, Brooke doing her hair for her, because it's just, there are few characters in the series that I just want to be happy. And Robin has moved past her trauma in a very similar, I guess the power of which is very similar to characters like Sanji or Nami, but in a unique way at the same time. And just to see her like that, smiling, it's beautiful. And she is one of the best characters in the story. She'll continue to be. The soul, even just ignoring the fact that there are tons of logistical reasons as to why Aokiji or Kuzan's power not being fatal makes sense. Even ignoring that, just the purpose in the story thematically, it all makes sense. It's all great. I love Robin, and that panel gave me, it added 10 years onto my life.
Yo, as an applause for me. I'm so glad you said that. I've been saying that ever since the Saul stuff came out in chapter 1066 with the with the Vega push with Shaka discussing all of that within that chapter. It's just, for me, right, looking back at how Robin inspired me coming off of Ennie's lobby, as like the main message there being from Saul to Robin. If you live long enough and you persevere through the dark times, you know, when the sun comes up, there will be something great waiting for you on the other side. Whether that's going to be friends who are going to be there for you, or whatever it's gonna end up being. If you persevere through it, just like you just said, you will be rewarded for it in some way, shape, or point. And because it's fiction, Oda's able to utilize that to the highest degree. And so when Saul was confirmed to be alive, and you see Robin's tears, I teared up there too, because I was like, I imagine myself in that situation as someone I really cared for, that I've been grieving for 20-something years, has just been confirmed to be alive. Oh my God, dude. That's huge. And like you said, it does not take away anything of what I've gone through for the past 20 years. Like, that is never going to leave. But now I can be like, oh, I can look forward to seeing this person again. And now all of us as fans can't wait to see their interactions. And I'm right there with you in regards to that thing being a red herring. First and foremost, Oda and the translators behind One Piece never, ever put "I've fallen and I can't get up" as a line in One Piece. That was the funniest, bro. When I tell you, I couldn't take it seriously. When the moment I saw that panel, I couldn't stop laughing for a good like 2 to 3 minutes, and I was like, I'm sorry, Saul, and I'm sorry, Oda, if this is meant to be taken seriously, but you can't do the life alert.
I know,
and not make me think that it's a joke. But yeah, man, I'm right there with you, dude. Like, so much greatness. Very, very early One Piece, and I'm glad you brought up the point about characters possibly returning. Obviously, the main character that a lot of us really want to see again with the crew, and the reason why they're potentially separated like this is Vivi, right? A character who is now definitely with the Bangs going to recognize Robin as Miss All Sunday, and they can have their conversations there if she ends up finding that side of the crew instead of the Straw Hat side of the crew. And I think that's going to lead into some really cool interactions with Vivi and the Straw Hats that she never got to meet the first time around with, and Brooke and Frankie and Robin. And so if she comes back and she's with that side of the Straw Hat ship, and then on the other side of the Straw Hat ship, we have the other characters who were with her, it's going to give us a really good opportunity to have bonding moments and moments of trust and potential, where Vivi and Robin are kind of have like a push and pull relationship of like, I don't really trust you, and seeing how that ends up playing. I really like what Randy said in the Reverie in regards to that, and I think that's such a great idea. But on the other side of things, with the Loki and Luffy stuff, ever since the Bartolomeo chapter, where Shanks and Yasop in particular blew up the ship, I've been thinking a lot about the repercussions of that, because obviously at the end of the series, and whenever Luffy sees the newspaper, he's gonna have to deal with the reality that Shanks either killed or attempted to kill one of his Grand Fleet, somebody who gave him food. And we know Luffy does not forgive anybody who takes someone out that gave him food, let alone one of his friends. And so, what is that internal conflict going to be like? Because we saw his reaction to Loki just talking trash about Shanks. He swung immediately. He didn't care who he was. He went Gear 4, went straight to swinging on Loki. And so, how is he going to feel? How is that internal conflict going to be after Elbaf, or whenever he gets the newspaper, and he sees Shanks takes out Bartolomeo? And then he's going to be, that's going to be the first time in Luffy's life where I'm going to assume inside of his mind, he's going to be like, yo, what do I do? Because the Shanks that I know is a pirate. And obviously, individuals who do that, go into somebody else's territory and do this thing, that is what's going to happen to them. I know Shanks. But inside of his heart, he's going to be like, but he did that to one of my people. And so I can't wait to see Luffy's reaction to Shanks in that situation, because that could create some really cool conflict for their potential clash. Because I've always felt the Luffy and Shanks clash is going to be like the Roger Whitebeard clash in the Odin flashback. That's very playful and very fun. Yeah. But if Oda wants to take a different approach and have Bartolomeo be the beginning piece of a potential conflict rising between Luffy and Shanks that really makes that battle have true stakes on the line, I'm also down for that too. And so I don't know what he's building in regards to the Luffy versus Shanks thing, because it really does feel like he's setting something up in the background for Luffy to have a massive moment of internal conflict where he's gonna have to make a decision in regards to Shanks and his Grand Fleet, especially if other individuals get involved too. And once he reads what truly happened to Bartolomeo. And so I want to get your thoughts on that and before we move into the next topic, in regards to the potential future there with the Luffy and Shanks stuff, and what could be the repercussions of what we're getting here with the Loki conversation, in regards to the Luffy and Shanks stuff, because obviously that is one of the most important things to Oda. That's what he started the series off with, so there's a lot riding on this. But and we all know that that's the meeting that every single One Piece fan is looking forward to. But it truly does feel like with every arc and with every moment, he's building towards something that may not be what we're expecting. And either way, I'm going to be really, really happy just seeing it take place. But I'm curious in hearing your thoughts on that, because we haven't had a chance to talk about the Bartolomeo chapter or anything. What do you think is going to be happening there? What the repercussions of that?
Yeah, so I thought that chapter was so, and that whole sequence was so interesting because, yeah, it's a really interpretive moment for Shanks because, he tested his loyalty, he let him go, and then Yasopp goes off and decides to punish him for what he was doing. And Shanks, it looked to me, I guess the spirit of that moment is that Shanks, that isn't something that he would have done, but it isn't something that he really tried to stop Yasopp to do. It isn't something that he hugely disapproved of doing. And yeah, like you say, that is something that traditionally Luffy would have a lot of problems with. I've been for a long time in the camp that they're gonna have their face-off. It's gonna be near the end of the series, if not. I've definitely toyed with the idea of it being the final fight in the series. When all is said and done, all that remains is for Luffy to fulfill the promise and take the throne, you know? And Shanks standing in the way would be very poetic like that. And it would, like you say, it would be very playful. It wouldn't be that Shanks would be evil and would be suddenly a final boss, like in a JRPG or something. But it would be a very playful, sort of, again, like we were talking a lot about Haikyuu, kind of like a Haikyuu final match spirit to it. That's what I always envision. But Oda's now opened up the potential for there to be, I don't think we'll lose that, but I think that there will be layers of moral complexity between the two and rougher edges to it by adding this sort of chaos factor to it. He's opened up the door for it, and it makes it more hard to predict exactly how it'll go, because I find it hard to reconcile the idea that Luffy and Shanks don't end the series, in great spirits. That's just always what I've imagined the series to be, and that's still what I imagine it'll be. But, and it seems like it's made up for that. But now the way to get there is for Luffy to really have to process some difficult things about what it means to be the type of figure he is. And I don't really know. There are a lot of unknowns with how it's going to go. And on top of that, there's Yasopp, and I think that Elbaf is really set up to have a ton of great things for Usopp for obvious reasons. Maybe among them would be him coming to terms with his father and the type of person he is, because I think they're really antitheses of each other.
True that.
So there's that too. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of that, and I'm really down for it. I think in general, Luffy is going to have to come to terms in this final saga with the fact that things are complicated. Like, Luffy has gone through life pretty much being a freedom fighter and liberating people, and he says he's not a hero, but he is a hero to 95% at least of the people he's come into contact with. He's overthrown regimes, he's restored freedom to so many islands, and been a symbol of hope, a god to others. He's been a hero. But he just said, I'm just doing what I'm doing. I love saving my friends. I love eating. He follows his heart, and he doesn't think about the complicated stuff. However, he's going to have to I think he's going to have to, at least a little bit, start to think of these complicated things. What if Shanks is someone different than the idealization I thought he would be, or I thought he is, if he's capable of doing this? What if, like, his... the quote-unquote job he has as the modern version of Joy Boy or Nika. Maybe there are duties attached to that he doesn't want thrust upon him. But he's coming to terms with the fact of what that represents, this god that he embodies. He got it a little bit through, like, he literally learned what it is through Emmett.
Yeah.
So he's getting a bit of a greater awareness of that. And also... I think in line with the idea of Vivi rejoining the crew, him and the Straw Hats have now become the spearhead for this fight and revolution against this oppressive regime, against Emu. And they have the entire They have so many people behind them. They have the Grand Fleet. They have so many islands. They have what seems like a great portion of the world at their backs. But the thing is, and I think this is in spirit with the themes of the story of One Piece, is that you can't just, when you have that much weight, that much influence, one of the things that Oda, I think, consistently touts is that when you have power, you have to have responsibility with it. You have to have you have to have awareness of the power you have and use it wisely. The Straw Hats have an incredible amount of power that I don't think it's dawned on them, the amount of influence they have. But to do that, but to sort of wield that, they have to have a greater awareness. And for that, they have to be a little bit political. They have to realize what their power means. They have to sort of navigate what it means to have their power. And who is the perfect character? Who is that sort of political figure? Vivi. Like, yes. Vivi joining the Straw Hats is perfect for that, for the greater awareness of what they represent. And I think it all just coalesces with this idea of Luffy. I don't think he's going to change as a person fundamentally. I don't think he's going to change his motives or anything. But I think he has to, at least to an extent, realize that things are more complicated, that he has to approach life in a way that isn't totally carefree. He has to learn a little bit. And I think he'll ultimately be open to it because he's been learning throughout the whole series. Just this is a bit more. And yeah, I think Shanks is a huge part of that. And I think it's gonna come from from multiple directions in parallel as the story moves towards its conclusion.
Dude, I love so much of that. I can't stop thinking about what you said in regards to Vivi and her position, because I've been thinking about what Vivi's role would be and why Oda has been holding off on it for so long. Because Yamato being held off for a while makes sense to me, because Yamato's going to be sort of like an individual who's going to be similar to Odin and writes down like the travels and stuff. I was like, okay, that makes sense for being super endgame. But the Vivi stuff is where I'm like, I've always wondered what's going to be the role there. And as the Lily stuff has been coming into play, I'm like, okay, maybe we could be playing around with something here. But what you just said really dawned on me in regards to the political power and making them understand truly just what it is that they have here. Considering that after Elbaf, it looks like that's that. Like, it's the final battle for the One Piece is going to be happening directly after Elbaf, I'm assuming, which is going to bring, of course, Emu and everybody else in their in regards to the massive war that's about to take place. And I think what better individual than Vivi to let them know not just about the happenings around the world, but also what the power that they have in regards to this as an emperor's crew. I think that is so key and so important. I can't wait for the Vivi stuff if that is what Oda has in store. But now we're going to get into another member of the big three. One that I have been enjoying seeing you go through, bro. Bleach Greatness, the Kubo Awesome Sauce. Remind us the chapter that you're currently on for the individuals that are not watching your streams. Because I think last time that you and I talked, we were like in the middle of Wakamundo, if I'm not mistaken. And now you're well past that. So what chapter did you leave off on in the last stream?
Yeah, so I think it was, hold on, let me just double check my anime list because it might not be updated. No, yeah, so we just finished off 528. So literally I finished I finished at the chapter Everything But the Rain.
Oh.
That's where I ended. It literally ends with a flashback of Masaki that I've been dying for since the beginning of the series. Sort of over top of Ishin. That's where I ended.
Yeah. So before I ask you your thoughts on End of Arrancar Fullbring and the beginning of this legendary arc, I just have to say this, man. I obviously have a lot of love for this series, and I really do appreciate your streams because it's allowed me an opportunity not just to relive those dear memories of mine, but to see a lot of things in a different light through somebody who's binging this stuff and this material for the first time. That's just been such a magical experience. But in the midst of that, I've been thinking a lot about certain parts of the story that that have just been extremely they've been rent free ever since I first experienced them, but in particular lately, these events just I can't stop thinking about. And one of those things is the section that you just finished for the 480 to where you just left off on 528. There's just so I think in regards to anyone, whenever you get into stories through, I don't care what it is that you watched whenever you were younger, something's gonna some sort of formative media is gonna start developing the core of what your tastes are in stories. And obviously in my end, one of those things was Sailor Moon, which is what then led me to really love Bleach, because they're sort of similar in a few different aspects in regards to the episodic nature at the beginning and the characters having like these double lives that's like hiding from the student side, and then you go out and you do your hero stuff after that. I've always really loved that kind of stuff within stories, and that all started thanks to Sailor Moon. But one thing that I've always appreciated in regards to some of these stories is the idea of momentum, and that goes back to my absolute love and adoration for the Midgar section of Final Fantasy VII. And I feel like anytime I see any story that reminds me of that Midgar section, what I mean by that is, it's like a sense of progression that is non-stop, but everything within it just feels like the writer's pen is on fire as they are going through a lot of these sequences, as if everything is just happening. They're just relaying what the characters are saying. And I could bring up a multitude of examples, whether it's York New or in Arcane Season 1, where there's just a non-stop progression that it feels so right. And my favorite example of this from a weekly standpoint is how I felt the momentum of progression while experiencing the stretch that you're currently in right now in Bleach. Because there is a crazy amount of momentum, and Kubo's really good in regards to his momentum. Obviously, Soul Society has a lot of that, and as does Fullbring. But the Arrancar saga, coming off of that, I felt like his style changed in a way that I really enjoyed, because obviously that's an arc that means so much to me, and it has a lot of those moments as well. But as an overall package, it really is quite a bit different in regards to the pace and the way the story is being told, because it was necessary for the long epic that he was going for there. So when you get into Fullbring, and it sort of resets the series again, and you get that slice of life, really like a murder mystery, thriller-esque pace of the story that serves as a great palate cleanser at that moment in time. It's really well done. And when you finish that particular section, you go into the greatness, starting at 480. I feel like Kubo turned it up to like 100, and it didn't feel out of place. Where from a structure standpoint, it was like, oh my god, it just felt like everything was popping off, and the whole series was just waiting for everything to pop off here. And so, just providing my memories as a weekly reader at that time, before I pass it over to you to let me know your thoughts throughout the entire stretch, is that as all that stuff was popping off within the beginning sections of the Blood War, it was so fascinating to see this stuff play out, considering that the theories and things that we'd had throughout the course of so many years. But throughout all of it, I just couldn't believe how Kubo had us all every single week by the hair. I mean, it was like chapters ended too quick, but we didn't care. It was like nonstop every week. We just couldn't wait. And this was probably the arc I reread the most as it was going on, because it was just such a fun arc to reread. It reminded me of like having a fun gameplay loop, like if I was playing Resident Evil 4 again, and I'm just addicted to the gameplay loop of it. Kubo, within the beginning section of this arc, he like mastered lacing your arc with crack, where it's like, it's just there's something about the sense of progression that you have while going through the beginning, this particular stage of the arc, that it has one of the strongest starts to an arc, and I don't mean to associate that with something being fast, but what I am associating with is similar to how it was when Sabaody Impel Down Marineford was happening, and you felt this immediate like, man, things are really, really popping. And even though the chapters are flowing at a similar rate as usual, the rate in which you're getting this information is coming out so much faster. It feels like these chapters are faster. And so in Bleach's case, I was so impressed how a weekly manga was able to tell a brand new story at a really fast rate while also keeping everything in check. And in particular in regards to the major events that were happening here. And I felt that in a weekly standpoint. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because seeing you go through this section of the story again and seeing how it feels to be done in binges. So like you did it in a sort of like Arcane-esque type of way where you like watched or you read Act 1 and you're going into Act 2 and then it's like you're going into it in these batches, and I feel like that's sort of like the perfect way to go through this particular section.
Oh yeah.
And so it's been a really, really cool way of experiencing this part of the story again. It's just reminded me of how good Kubo is at structuring his arcs, and he's not afraid to structure his arcs differently than the stuff that's come before. Because obviously, every single arc in the series is different while still carrying the same thematic stuff that makes the series so brilliant and special, and each individual arc. But I really want to hear your thoughts because End of Arrancar, with all the peak fiction that was there, Fullbring, which I'm so glad you enjoyed as someone who, as always, appreciated that arc. That is a phenomenal, not just a piece of the manga, but also a brilliant anime adaptation. And then, of course, with the Thousand Year Blood War, there's a lot of really good stuff here that Kubo he was on a crazy roll while he himself was sort of recovering from the sickness that he underwent at the end of the Arrancar saga. And so you really get to see a lot of the stuff that he's always wanted to write be at the forefront here, as well as his inspirations being on his sleeve with the Yu Yu Hakusho stuff and Fullbring. So I just really want to hear your thoughts on this, because watching those VODs gave me so much life throughout this particular stretch of the story. So the floor is yours, man. The Bleach greatness.
I'm so glad you've been enjoying them, because it's been, I say this all the time, but like especially Bleach has been such a special stream series, and continues to be, and there's still a lot left, so I can't wait to continue. But I just, before talking about the actual story content, I just want to I guess comment on something that you said, which is very true, which is that my reading experience has been picture perfect in terms of the amount of chapters and stopping points I have per stream. From the beginning, like every stream has a big moment, or a star character, or 2 or 3 characters that have the spotlight. Like there was a Tosin stream, there was a Gin, well, there's been multiple Gin streams, but there was one where it was sort of lesser, the less flashy fights of in Arrancar, but there was great stuff for like Kira and Hisagi and stuff like that. And it's really the structure of the streams and the amount of chapters within each has really allowed me to hone in on the characters and binge sections that are very important for them, so I get the full picture, but really focus on the stuff that deserves to be focused on and not to gloss over it. And that is in large part thanks to the mods who put these streams together and figure out the best stopping points for me. And Fiji in particular, I talked to Fiji in between, who is like, obviously he is the Bleach guy. And I talked to Fiji in between them, and he has actually suggested once I hit 1,000 Year Blood War, we should probably do less chapters than usual. You'll see why, but we should do less chapters than usual. I said, okay, cool. And it was just like perfectly suited for the Unohana Kenpachi fight, the Yamamoto Yuha fight, just honestly unbelievably structured. So I just want to say thank you to the mods for helping with that, and also thank you Fiji for being really encouraging for video stuff with that, because I've put out 2, maybe 3 soon videos about Bleach during my read through, which I did not intend to do, and Fiji's been editing them all, and I've been bouncing off thoughts of him, so I just wanted to take the time to say that. So thanks a lot to the mods and Fiji,
guy, and the mods and the rest of the mods. I appreciate all of you guys, seriously.
Yes, because they're the reason that this has been so enjoyable so far, for me and everyone else. But yeah, as for the series itself, man, it's crazy. It keeps outdoing itself on another level. Arrancar is just it's crazy how exponentially better it gets as you go. Like you have some of the stuff early on. I think it's a great start to the arc. But then you start getting, you have stuff with Turn Back the Pendulum. You have great payoff for, like, Bleach is one of the best series full stop out there I've ever seen in terms of payoff. There are characters that just have, Gin drops a sorry in Soul Society, and that just hooks me, and I obsess over it, and I lose sleep over it. What does he mean by this sorry? And then not only does it get paid off, but it makes him one of the best characters in the series. Tosin and his backstory and his horrifically tragic, ugly, pitiful end. Amazing payoff for where he began and how his character was established. All the stuff with Aizen, all the stuff that we're getting now in Thousand Year Blood War, with Yamamoto and Unohana and Kenpachi, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Arrancar is just unbelievable. I think it really solidifies Aizen as, I think last time we talked, I ranked my characters, and Aizen was like 6th or 7th or 8th, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, I think he's great, but other characters have just cooked more, and I'm kind of waiting. Arrancar did it all. Arrancar did it all for him, and I just love how intimately Kubo knows his character. It seems like a simple thing, but like he knows Aizen so well, because in Arrancar, just to preface all this, it's amazing top to bottom, and Turn Back the Pendulum and everything, Ichigo's internal battles, all the Orihime stuff, Ulquiorra Orihime, incredible, just unbelievable, and the presentation of it is like half of the beauty of it. The presentation of those final Ulquiorra fight chapters, just out of this world. Couldn't believe what I was reading. But I think of Arrancar, and the thing I think of most is Deicide, and how it pays off Gin and Rangiku, one of the most beautiful doomed romances I've ever seen, one of my favorite relationships in the entire series. And then it shows us this horrifyingly twisted, what's it called? The chrysalis stage, this evolution for Aizen. But what I love about it is Kubo nails the aura for Aizen, the badassery. He's intelligent. The stuff he did with Momo, replacing himself with Momo, I was screaming. I couldn't believe that.
What a great villain.
Insane. And he does all that because he's intelligent, he's raw, he's badass, he's so powerful, he says that he's beyond everyone, and you believe it because he shows it with stuff like that. He's just this incredible villain in the purest villain sense, and Kubo sells that so well. But what I love about it is Kubo knows Aizen so well because he makes him at times, such a loser. He is such a loser sometimes. Aizen, like, the entire final fight where Ichigo just destroys him, it takes incredible self-awareness and understanding of the character to do that with a character like Aizen, to not make it epic and like I don't know, the apex of Meruem versus Netero or something, and for Ichigo to just stomp him. Ichigo throughout that whole fight is bored, and Aizen just keeps trading blows, and Ichigo just looks bored. And the whole time, Aizen is trying to make himself feel better, make himself, like, deep down inside, you can tell something's wrong. I'm about to lose. Something's going wrong. But he's going, oh, did you not see how one swipe of my weapon has demolished the landscape? It's like, come on, dude. What are you talking about? No one cares. Like, Ichigo doesn't care. No one cares. And then Ichigo stops his sword and he goes, so momentarily, you for a split second, momentarily in an ephemeral way, you surpass me. But just a split second. Don't you dare think that you're actually more powerful than me. He's so insecure. He's so insecure. He's so he's got such a complex about needing to be on top and not wanting to look up at anyone and needing to be this god. And how human is that? Of needing, of feeling inferior, of feeling yet like you need to be better than others. It's just the most genuine human flaw. And that awareness of the character really struck me during that final battle. And then the way it ends, it's fresh in my mind because I just saw the anime episodes this past week. The way it ends with Kisuke kind of trapping him, and then him just screaming at him for the sheer inhumanity of how he could just stand there and let the status quo stay the way it is. And we know from Kisuke's point of view, he doesn't agree with everything the Soul Society does, but losing the status quo would be the losses would be too great, and he's not willing to give that up. But Aizen just cannot stand to see it. He cannot stand it, and he would tear everything up. He would eviscerate everything if it meant starting anew, with him on the throne at the forefront of this new world that he views as a utopia, and that is so sympathetic. Like, Soul Society it's been drilled into us. All these characters we love and sympathize with, they're standing for something and defending something that is corrupt, that is not good. And the story's clear about that. So Aizen just hits on every level. He's this amazing villain, and he's raw and badass and intelligent and strong and clever, and he plans so far ahead. And he gives you such interesting theory food with some of the things he says, like, I've known you since before you were born, all that stuff. And then he's also so insecure and so human and in some ways so pathetic, and then it comes around to being so utterly sympathetic. So he just struck me, and after that, he became my second favorite character, only second to Ichigo. And he hasn't moved from that. He hasn't moved from that spot. Others are challenging at the moment because there's a lot of greatness, but he hasn't moved. He hasn't moved yet. So yeah, Arrancar is amazing, and what I take away from it most, there's a cavalcade of so many things. I didn't even mention Grimjo, who's unbelievable. I didn't even mention Neutra and Stark, just great characters.
So good.
It just hits on every level. There's so much in Arrancar and so much that's great about Bleach. And at its peak, it's like it's right up there with the greatest manga I've ever read. Now I haven't gotten to Fullbring, but I feel like you might want to say some stuff about the stuff I said. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you might.
Yeah, so right before you get into Fullbring,
go ahead. Like I need to take a sip of water.
Oh, no, you're good. Yeah, no, I really appreciated you saying all that about Aizen because I couldn't agree more. We had that conversation a few months ago now about the characters that best represent our tastes, and I'm so glad that I met Aizen early in my journey because it's thanks to Aizen, and it's so cool how we had it in reverse, because the character that I always think of when Aizen comes to mind for me is always Beatrice, as like the other character that Aizen reminds me of so much. And so I saw Beatrice through the Aizen lens. You saw Aizen through the Beatrice lens. Yeah. And so I've always really appreciated Aizen so much for a lot of different reasons, obviously, that you just beautifully said. But I think one of the major ones, just as a screen presence, he has one of the strongest presences on the screen I've ever seen, whether it's in the manga or in the anime, and they got brilliant voice actors to play Aizen in both English and Japanese, but the character just has so much, even before he's revealed it back in the Soul Society arc, the character always just had like a really strong presence, and Kubo really struck gold with the character as just a comic book character that that individuals can either latch onto for being a super cool dude that takes care of business, but but also for individuals who really appreciate the other side of Bleach as well, for the beauty and how poetic it is in nature. Because I feel like Aizen represents that to a T. As a matter of fact, with the Arrancar saga literally meaning arrancar, which is to rip off the mask, and we see how Ichigo had to do that through the course of the arc, with that culminating obviously there at the end, with him and Tensa Zangetsu, there with that incredible sequence before the Mugetsu. In the Arrancar saga, to then have an Aizen who continuously tried peeling off layers of his mask, as you said, due to his insecurities, and then he tried to put the mask back on, and it just kept getting off, and eventually he went full mask off when he had the conversation with Kisuke. That was the real Aizen, and I just really appreciate how Kubo handled both Aizen and Ichigo throughout the course of the arc, because they were not only written in parallel, but they carry that theme of arrancar, the mask, and how Ichigo went in one direction and Aizen went in the complete other, and it was just a beautiful thing to see within the Arrancar saga. I absolutely adore that arc. But yeah, man, Fullbring, dude, Fullbring,
man. Yeah, Fullbring was so special. I think I don't know if someone said this to me or I thought of it. I'm not sure, but it really strikes me as having a similar role in Bleach as Fishman Island does in One Piece. More so in terms of, I guess, fan reception and its reputation. Just from what I've seen, I love both arcs, and I think Fullbring is just really. It was so special. It was just so special. I think I did maybe 2.5 or 3 streams of it, but specifically the final stream of it, where all the payoff of for Bleach, it's a pretty short arc. Like it's not short for regular standards, but for Bleach, it's I think it's the shortest one, and
it is.
Just from a pure, I guess, page-to-page engagement perspective, it's just tons of fun for what Tsukishima does, imprinting himself into everyone's lives, dominating and domineering over Ichigo, and just making him feel this despair. And it's just really thrilling and really awesome in that way. And the stage it sets is just so sublime. Having Ichigo be stripped of his powers, be stripped of his agency, this person who felt like the only way he was worth something was through his ability to protect his friends, and therefore through his strength, and that's gone. And he's just left in this malaise, in this daze. He doesn't know what to do with himself, really, for a significant time skip. And so it starts there. It's really interesting character work from there. We slowly, gradually understand what the Fullbringers are through Ginjo, and we get the incredibly thrilling stuff with Tsukishima, and then Ichigo loses all these people, and it's heartbreaking, and he's at rock bottom. And what I love about it is how the arc then establishes all of that, and then almost answers itself, almost rebuts the entirety of the series through what it does in the final stretch of Fullbring. So the way I look at Bleach is that I made a video about this. It's such a poetic, quiet, reflective, introspective series. It makes you feel deeply melancholic. It makes you feel deeply sad through a lot of these backstories and a lot of the way that it's presented. Like, the way I describe it is, up until Fullbring, there's a lot of deeply emotional, affecting stuff. Such sad stories. Gin, Tosen, Ulquiorra, like any given Arrancar that gets any time, has a deeply affecting, melancholic, sorrowful past. Ichigo's internal situation. Like, I've never, during that section of Bleach, up until the end of Arrancar, I never really cried much, but I felt deeply sorrowful and melancholic, just not sort of outwardly. it just filled me with that sort of unique emotion. Fullbring had me bawling. Fullbring just like answers itself. It answers the melancholy and the darkness with this immense, it's just bursting with hope and emotionality. And the moment where Rukia comes after Ichigo realizes he's been betrayed by Ginjo, he's lost everyone, it seems like. But what he forgot was that there was this whole other side to his life, that in the moment he became tunnel visioned on his sorrow and tragedy, and I think in that moment he gave up on living, gave up on life. And then Rukia comes and makes him realize there's this whole other world of people who support him. He's never alone. And the beautiful thing about that is that they're only there, or rather, the reason they're there is because they reflect what he's put into the world. They're only there because he has been his compassionate, persistent, persevering, loving self. They're only there because he loved and tried to understand all these people. Renji's only there because of that. Byakuya, Rukia, everyone who was there was only there because he gave the time to try to understand them and communicate with them and bond with them. And he's reminded of the beautiful person he is and the beautiful people he's come to know in that moment. Also, shout out to Uryu, who plays a really, really pivotal point in pivotal role in the arc for sort of giving him that hope. He's kind of like a bridge to that.
Yes.
But so that moment's great because it sort of recontextualizes everything, and almost rebuts against the feel of the series up until that point. But then the recontextualization for Tsukishima, where we see this skulking, menacing presence of how he imprinted himself into all these lives falsely, but we see that it's because he was alone. He wanted to feel as if he had these friends, even though he never did. He was entirely alone. I love the minimalism in his backstory. Literally all we learn is that he was alone, and then Ginjo came. And that's it. That's all that's needed. And you see it in every essence of his role. It's beautiful efficiency. And then we have Ginjo, who is such a stunning character. I love this character. And the dynamic with Ichigo is one of my favorite in the whole series. These two characters who are, in a lot of ways, cut from the same cloth, very hopeful, very have the same spirit and have the same desire to connect with others. And I love the way that he becomes a sort of god reflecting Aizen in just a different way for the Fullbrings. But just the way that he was betrayed by the Soul Society, and he justifiably, in my opinion, came to realize that all he wanted to do is basically lash out, is to have vengeance, is to claw his way to the top and then enact his rage. And he sees someone in Ichigo who's going through the same thing, who's being used in the same way. And what's beautiful about it is that Ichigo is able to see hope, regardless. And what Ichigo does is he doesn't say you're wrong. He doesn't say you're wrong and what you're saying isn't valid. He doesn't invalidate him. And Ginjo literally reflects on this internally. I expected him to either just deny what I said or agree with me. Or come onto my side and give in to despair. He did neither of those things. He disagreed with me, but he acknowledged what I said. Because he can see where I'm coming from. He just sees the world differently. And what I love as well is that there's such an element of luck to it. Like, Ichigo thinks that maybe if things were slightly differently, I would think differently about this. I could be Ginjo right now. And so there's such melancholy there. If the tables were turned, maybe we'd be together. Maybe you'd be me. It's so volatile. It's just like a flip of a coin. It's just random luck. And so and then at the end, how it all concludes with I don't remember which chapter it was, but there's a chapter cover of Ginjo's smile. The two fight. The two fight. Ichigo and Ginjo fight. But Ichigo really communicates with him, and I think gives him at the end of it all a friend and a reason to see hope where he couldn't before he departs. Now I now know that he's a part of Thousand Year Blood War in some way. I don't know how, but regardless, ignoring that for now, it's such a beautiful conclusion to lay him to rest, and the way it coalesces with Tsukishima and Shishigawara, this person who has been just abused by Tsukishima, who
Right.
who against all logic finds it within himself to believe in him and see him as this idol and love him and support him right at the end of his life. That is what breaks the cycle of this sort of conditioning of there is no hope. Some would call it stupidity because it sort of flies in the face of logic, but that ability to forgive and see the beauty in people, in what some would say is an illogical way, like Ichigo does, like Shishigawara does. And right at the end of his life, Tsukishima feels lucky to have lived despite everything. And he appreciates Ginjo, and he appreciates this friend he makes right at the end. It's beautiful. And I didn't even mention her, but Riruka is an amazing character.
Oh,
Absolutely amazing. And
She's so good.
there's just these little lines throughout, like when Tsukishima is just grieving so intensely for Ginjo and just goes, you taught me, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it ends with, you taught me so many things, but you never taught me what to do if you died.
Oh,
It's
so good.
that destroyed me, man. It's just this beautiful arc of expressiveness and just bursting with love for life and the beauty of love and what it means to pour yourself into these relationships despite pain, and the beauty of humanity and all of that. And last note on Fullbring is, I have to give credit to another series that we're going to talk about in a little bit, because a good portion of the last stream of Fullbring, we had a certain track from Trails of Cold Steel 3 playing. Alley of Silence from Trails of Cold Steel 3.
I do remember that.
It was playing for like straight up an hour during the whole emotional final section. Everyone in chat was weeping, I was weeping, and the music was a huge part of that. So now I cannot think of that song without thinking of Fullbring and Ginjo and Tsukishima.
That's so awesome.
And everyone, I've gotten a lot of people on chat like, God damn, maybe I should play Trails. Like that music was insane. Like that was,
Let's go.
it's a beautiful song for anyone who doesn't know. It's Alley of Silence, Trails of Cold Steel 3. It's just like a root song, but it's so melancholic and hopeful and yet sorrowful, but also fills you with such optimism and emotionality. Kind of like Fullbring. It was a perfect match for Fullbring. But yeah, anyways, Fullbring was unreal. I have such love for it.
Yo, first and foremost, once again, I'm so glad you got into Trails. Yeah, anytime I hear those soundtracks in any stream, I'm losing my mind. Or in any VOD, it doesn't matter. I love that soundtrack so much. That's such a good one. But going back into your thoughts on Fullbring, I think one thing that, going back to the Akane conversation from earlier about like wearing inspirations on your sleeve and stuff. And how, for example, I've been recently playing the Dragon Quest thing and it reminded me of Hunter x Hunter. Obviously, this arc was heavily inspired by Chapter Black in Yu Yu Hakusho for the Fullbring arc, and I think what's really beautiful about that, anytime another example of this is JJK, where JJK, you can obviously see the inspirations on its sleeve in regards to the things that it's trying to pull from. And I think in Bleach's case, what it does with its own retelling or interpretation of the Chapter Black stuff, it allows Kubo for this sort of freedom to tell an arc in his own way that truly feels like his own voice. As a matter of fact, viewing the arc through that Chapter Black lens allows me to appreciate the Fullbring arc like ×5, because I truly get to see Kubo's voice in a very similar way to how when I see Oda take a fairy tale that is well known and Odifies it in his own way, it allows me to truly appreciate his own voice. That's how I felt throughout the entirety of Fullbring, because Kubo's always been an individual that wears his inspirations on his sleeve, but in particular in that arc, it truly felt like his. It felt like such a personal thing we were talking about earlier, that even more, I feel like every arc it feels very personal to Kubo, but especially like I was talking about earlier with the with how much he was going through at the end of Arrancar, to come off of that, it truly felt like he went into Fullbring wanting to write something that he wanted to scream, that he wanted to say, and you really see that throughout the course of that arc, and especially what Ichigo goes through within that arc as well. It's some really powerful stuff. And just as a quick side note, as someone who anything to do with memories in any story hits different for me, and when Tsukishima started messing with the memories of everybody that he holds dear, that stuff really hit. It like really, really, really hit. And I felt so bad for Ichigo. I think Kubo was in a stretch right there where, similar to how Oda does, like right before like Luffy punches the Celestial Dragon or he punches Bellamy, it's great setup for a payoff that just feels so satisfying, or like the final punch in Skypiea whenever he rings the bell. I think when Rukia shows up and gives him his powers back, it's kind of like Ichigo's Celestial Dragon Punch, where it's such a satisfying moment after having seen everything that he's gone through, and he felt so powerless, didn't have anyone there, even though he had his friends, obviously, but now that even their memories were taken, it truly felt like the end. And just one more quick thing before we get into 1,000 Year Blood War. The theories that were happening at the time were so crazy. Like, I remember the craziness going in regards to how is Ichigo going to get out of the situation. Like, is he going to get, since the Fullbring powers were like tapping into his hollow abilities, is he going to get his hollow powers? What's happening there with Kisuke and stuff? And it was so many theories, and to see that Kubo played into that with he looks back and he sees Kisuke and Nishi, and he's like, oh no, not you guys too. And then he's like, no, not us, you idiot. And you look back and you see Rukia. It was just such a powerful thing in presentation while also being so satisfactory. And it just, you gained a sense of fulfillment while experiencing that final stretch. That's one of the best final stretches in the entire series, is from chapter 459 until the end in 479. It's so powerful, and every character that gets their battles there, whether it's on the Fullbringer side or on the Shinigami side, it's just so well done for every individual character. And shout out to Kenpachi for being Kenpachi in that in that entire section. That was so much fun. But yeah, man, the big one, obviously, an arc that means so much to a lot of Bleach fans. It's definitely, like I told you before, Arrancar Saga has my heart and soul as a piece of nostalgia, but similar to how like that would be like Water 7 for me in One Piece, and then Wano then came around and proved to be like the thing that I love so much. Similarly, that's how I feel about 1,000 Year Blood War, where it's an arc that means a lot to me for many different reasons, and I would just love to hear your overall thoughts on that, but specifically because it is one of my favorite fights, as I told you before, in the history of Shonen Jump magazine, that Kenny Unohana greatness. It's one of the most it's one of my favorite twists in the series, because you said earlier that Kubo is one of the greatest in regards to setups and payoffs, and I couldn't agree more. Because throughout the course of the entire series, we're all wondering, like, why is everybody so afraid of Unohana? Why is this air of aura around this character that not only does she feel like everyone's like a mother figure to everyone, but everyone legitimately respects her in a way they would like a Sephiroth or something. Like there's like a really weird relationship here, and when you get that twist when you turn the page and you see the first Kenpachi thing, and you see what Shunsui has to deal with here as his first conflict as the brand new appointment, and it's like, what in the flying flattener is going on here? And you get, of course, to the battle itself, and it's one of the most beautiful things that the Kubos, or not even just Kubo, that I've ever seen in Shonen Jump. It's poetry in motion. It's so beautiful. And one quick side note before I pass it back up to you, because I just have so many great thoughts on this arc. When chapter 512 came out, that's like a top 5 memory for me in reading manga weekly. That is the chapter when Ichigo shows back up after having not been present for a while. He was trapped in Quilge's jail for God knows how many chapters, and he's trying to get out. And you posted the panel on Twitter of whenever he's receiving all of the screams from everybody in Soul Society, unable to do anything. And you see that for chapters on end. And finally, it breaks free of the jail right after the Yamamoto and Yuha stuff. and you get a chapter just dedicated to Kubology presentation at its absolute finest, where he shows up on the field, has the conversation with Byakuya, please save Soul Society, and then the chapter ends with him showing up in front of Yuha. That is one of my favorite chapters in ever, whether in the series or just in manga in general, because of the way that it is. Fiji always talks about Kubo in his presentation, but I feel like both the Kenny Unohana fight and the Ichigo showing up sequence there in 512 really showcases the power of Kubo's ability to present information and how cinematic it can feel, while at the same time it has this aura of like Nomura dearly beloved to it, where everything just feels like it's right. And I don't know how he does it. Kubo's a magician when it comes to the way that he presents his panels and his pages and his page layout. But that chapter in particular, I always look back on as a masterclass in page layout. That's one of the greatest examples of that I've ever seen. It's Ichigo's version of Naruto showing up against Pain, or Luffy with the three admirals in Marineford. That's Ichigo when everything is at its very worst, popping up there. And Ichigo's had a lot of great entrances over the course of the series, but that one really stuck out to me as like, holy Flagnars, this guy is incredible. I mean, Kubo is just on a different level. So I just really wanted to talk about those two examples in particular as just he was just on a different level in this entire section. But favorite things from the arc so far, and things you can't wait to see here in the future, especially with the stuff you're about to experience. I'm so glad that was the chapter that you ended off on. A lot of great stuff to come.
Yeah. I've loved it so much so far. It's been by far the best start to an arc, like not even close to a Bleach arc. Yeah. And while there's been a great amount of payoff in the series up until this point, we are now getting not only payoff to things that I've been wondering about for ages, but we're getting incredible revelations after incredible revelations after incredible revelations. Like, it doesn't stop. We have like, because Yamamoto was always a badass, great character that had really interesting elements to him. But his fight with Yuha, it's something I've been waiting for forever. But how did Kubo make a fight between Yamamoto, who is without doubt an established character, but I wouldn't say that at that point in the story before the fight he's like top 20 in the series. He's not one of the better characters in the series. And a brand new villain, one of the greatest stretches of the manga. The most beautifully, I think, in terms of pure presentation, that's the most beautiful fight. In terms of the way there's brushstrokes, it just feels like a privilege to read that. I was in complete awe at the presentation of that, and the thematics, obviously, and the way the sort of Aizen-esque switcheroo that goes on with Yuha, and then Aizen actually delayed him enough to make it so that Ichigo could escape. Interesting, but outside of all that, the way it characterizes Yamamoto and sort of shows the monster within, the monster he had to become, his regrets, but also how he would lose himself in that monster, and then it all ends with this beautiful final expression at the end when he's defeated. Of this hyper detailed panel of just his face, and there are so many nuances and feelings you can interpret from that. So many. It's incredibly complex. So yeah, the establishment of the arc is great. We get into that fight. It is a showstopper. It is pure cinema. It is unbelievable. Then there's more establishment for Yuha as a character and connections to Zangetsu and Ichigo's past and who he is and what he means, and Quincy's and everything. And it's so thrilling. But yeah, the Kenpachi Unohana fight is just so unbelievably special. And I knew something was happening for both these characters. There was clearly something going on with Unohana. And Kenpachi was already established as a phenomenal character, but there was obviously something missing. I had the theory since Soul Society, and it still hasn't been confirmed, but I think it's all but confirmed, that like, he didn't even name his sword. He doesn't seem to have awareness of his Zanpakuto, and for me it's because it's Yachiru. I thought it was in Soul Society. I still think it is, and how appropriate that he names his Zanpakuto, this reflection of his soul, after the closest person in the world to him, the only person he really admired, someone who is a soulmate to me. I think they're soulmates, not necessarily romantically, but it need not be romantic to be soulmates. Mother and son, this incredible relationship. So I knew I'd get stuff individually for Kenpachi and for Unohana, but for them to have this relationship, for her to be the first Kenpachi, for them to have this relationship that is sold within a very quick fight, on the grand scheme of things, not much time is taken to establish everything that's going on there. But I immediately buy it, and it immediately becomes one of the most rich, layered, emotional, thematically dense, multifaceted dynamics, not just in Bleach, but like in Shonen, in anything. It's incredible. It's incredibly intimate, and it's so out of nowhere in the most beautiful way. Because I people who are paying attention, you can predict something's going on with Unohana, something's going on with Kenpachi, and he needs to unlock part of himself. There's been stuff throughout the series. His fight with Ichigo, it was beautiful, but there's clearly something going on there that he hasn't unlocked within himself. The way that Ichigo could understand everyone he fought against, but really misinterpreted Kenpachi. Like, that's really great indirect characterization. And how he fights Neutra in a Rancor, and there's this quiet moment where he just goes, I don't want to die. Like, he loses himself in these fights, and it seems like you could mistakenly say, and justifiably say, oh, he's like Hisoka. If this guy dies fighting like Hisoka in ecstasy, he could be happy with that. But no, he isn't. He isn't like that. Not at all. He fears the end. He doesn't want this to end. And that's a great precursor to him finding the first person in his life that he could have fun with through combat, and handicapping himself so that he could never let that end. And then Unohana having to die to unlock that for him to mature and grow and self-actualize and understand himself. It's beyond words to me, and it really is very allegorical of a coming of age, and more specifically of a rebirth and a genuine birth. There's lots of great...
Rebirth.
Yes, rebirth.
Go ahead.
No,
it's Final Fantasy VII.
It is. No, literally it is. It's a rebirth. I think he was born properly into the world when he first met Unohana for the first time. Mm-hmm. I think he was reborn in the fight.
Yes.
And in both situations, there's a motherly figure. And in both situations, he is brought into the world through viscerality and blood. I'm just saying there's a lot of motherhood there.
Yes.
And I was so inspired by the intimacy and beauty of Unohana and Kenpachi and their relationship and all that goes on there, that in like this fervent, I talked about this on stream, in this crazy like fever, the morning after I read that on a Thursday, I read that on Wednesday. On the Thursday morning, I got up and I just was typing on my laptop for 2 hours, just wrote out a whole script about that fight. It's just so incredible. And what I love about it is just, it's a relationship that there is so much to it that you can't really define it. I think there are traits of so many things about it. And first, like I said, first and foremost is mother and son to me. But there's so many elements to it. There's so many things you can catch in the dialogue, in the dynamics, in the imagery of death and the deathly embrace at the end, in the way they just swing their swords and each blow is a line of dialogue that they communicate with each other. Yes. And it's a relationship that reminds me a lot of something in Black Sails, which I won't spoil for you, but also specifically two things. One of them is a line from Berserk, which Griffith thinks about Guts when thinking about the specificity of their relationship, where he says that it's a giant swirl of violent emotions in which none are definite but all are implied. That is a very apt description of, I think, Unohana and Kenpachi.
Absolutely.
And also, the most apt comparison I can make is their dynamic is scarily similar to the boss and Naked Snake in Metal Gear Solid 3.
Spitting.
It's
100%.
It is like bar for bar, while obviously being its own thing. It's so much like that. So much like it. And that, I was so glad I was able to play Metal Gear Solid 3 before reading this fight, because that added this whole new layer of appreciation for it. So yeah, that and then after this we have a Masaki flashback. It's crazy, man. I feel so taken aback and in awe and privileged to be able to read this. And it's I am an enjoyer. I enjoy so many things, but it's the sort of thing that I only really appreciated to this extent. Like I can only really compare it to things, rare story experiences. Like I can compare this to how I felt reading Chimera Ant, reading Nationals and Haikyuu, reading playing parts of Endwalker, which one day you'll understand. Parts of Infinite Wealth, Yakuza, parts of Umineko, but like. So I just listed off 4 or 5 stories, but there isn't much beyond that have replicated the feeling I feel when experiencing Thousand Year Blood War. I just feel such gratitude to be able to experience these payoffs that have been in the works for hundreds of chapters that Kubo is so clearly bursting at the seams to just get out there. So, needless to say, I really like it. I love it. And as long as it continues doing what it's doing, it is poised to become my favorite Bleach arc and definitely one of my favorite arcs ever.
Dude. Oh man, like I'm so excited for the upcoming stuff, because obviously stuff we've already experienced has been super good. So looking forward to seeing your thoughts and reactions, especially because of, you know, going back to where this conversation started, the way that you've been experiencing this thus far, and the way that the mods have been pacing this out is. It allows the arc to be read in such a digestible portion to allow you to really process the information that's there, and I think because of that, it's going to allow it to elevate this experience to a level to like the ones that you just stated. One of which I am so excited to talk to you about, because I have not had an opportunity to talk about this with anyone ever since I finished it back in February. This game, obviously. The latest entry in the Like a Dragon / Yakuza series, Infinite Wealth. This game dropped earlier this year, and I bought a PlayStation Portal specifically to play Infinite Wealth and 7 Rebirth whenever it dropped, while I was gone, because I was going to be going multiple trips in January and February. And then I ended up using it for a lot of other stuff later on because of how much I ended up loving the device. But when Infinite Wealth dropped, I think I have like 150 hours in the game, and it's mainly because I love everything about it, dude. So when Yakuza 6, when I first got to that, one of the main reasons why that game was my favorite for a significant amount of time is. Obviously, I love the story, and I love the characters, as I do in every single Yakuza game. But it's the stuff that you do around the area that really hit different for the Yakuza 6 stuff. And so when I got to Infinite Wealth, I was, of course, coming off of Like a Dragon 1 for the Ichiban stuff. I was like, yeah, this is gonna be peak. Like I already know Infinite Wealth is gonna be a go to. Then of course you get Gaiden, which is the transition between the two, and it's
so
okay,
good.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna get some peak. Wait, are you all right?
No, yeah, I'm all right. I just said so good. Gaiden's so good.
Oh no, I thought you said, oh, we're good. Oh no, yeah. No, guys, I thought there was like an audio discrepancy.
No.
Or something. No. So but yeah. And then Gaiden was incredible. And then we get to Infinite Wealth. And dude, like, obviously, I don't know where to begin. Like, getting into a new place by itself, a new location in Hawaii, was already enough of a fun playground. Where you have so many things to do. Going back to what I was talking about with Yakuza 6, where the mini games are just so much fun that I had a blast just going around and going on a detour Jing style and just engaging with everything I possibly could. But then you introduce me to a cast of characters that I love. I love them so much, man. I don't even know. Like, I love the characters. I already loved the characters introduced in the first one in regards to just the Ichiban saga. But then you start bringing in characters from Kiryu's entire journey, as well as the brand new additions exclusive to this game that now have connections to both characters. And it's like, oh my god. And then we're doing the Yakuza 0 thing, where we're going through both point of views and how they're intertwining with each other. And it's like, sweet mother of flag darts, man. It's taking everything I love from the series and putting it into one package. And then the turn-based combat is the best that it's been. The side quests in this game were, I mean, Yakuza has always had incredible side quests. But in this game, bro, there was some side quests that had me in tears. There was some side quests that reminded me of Gintama one-shot episodes, where I was legitimately in tears, and both Kiryu's and Ichiban's side. And I feel like both characters came out of this being much higher, and I already hold both characters in the highest regard. But coming off of this game, I love both characters more than I ever have. It's insane. So obviously, I want to hear your thoughts on it. I know I was able to attend some of the streams, but I was not able to attend the streams for the final stretch of the series. So I want to know your overall thoughts on Infinite Wealth. It's such a special game. It's one that they've been building towards for a very, very long time. And it was an ambitious project, taking one that's both within the place that we know and love, as well as taking us over into Hawaii. And it's structured in such a weird way, while also being so true to the series. And it's thematically, it's so rich in many different ways. But I want to hear your thoughts, story and the gameplay and the characters and Ichiban's. That's my guy, man. I love him.
I spent my whole stream series of, or I guess my journey with the Yakuza series. I started with Yakuza 0, and then since then it's been such an interesting journey because I at very least like every game in the series. I think every game is at least good. But it was interesting because I played through Kiwami 1, Kiwami 2, 3, 4, and I was like, are we ever going to reach the heights of 0 again? And then I played 5, and that was a huge turning point for me because I think it was a return to form in that, not that I disliked the stuff before it, like I said, but it was a return to greatness. Before it was good stuff. Then it was back to great stuff with 5 for me. And 6 took that to new heights. And 7, and then I was dreaming. And then Gaiden made me bawl with that last scene. But even still, with all the love I had for all these games, some of them got close, but none of them were better than 0 for me. And I'm like, is it going to happen? I wouldn't be disappointed if 0 ends up being my favorite in the series, because 0 is a masterpiece, and it deserves to be. It is not a shame to have it as the best game in any series. But
absolutely.
But then I played Infinite Wealth, and it was so clear that as long as they didn't completely just drop the ending, as long as the ending wasn't absolute garbage, it was going to be my favorite. And luckily, the ending is not only decent or solid. I think it's actually fantastic. In lots of ways that I think might be missed or overlooked. It's a very allegorical game, very symbolic and very subtextual. But it's my favorite game. It's my favorite game in the series. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I cannot believe that we live in a world where this and Rebirth released within a month of each other. That's crazy. That's crazy.
2 life-changing experiences, bro.
It's insane. Crazy. I can't believe it. And this year, I've experienced 2 games that are my two favorite in terms of side content. Rebirth was my favorite in terms of side content, but after what this game does with Dragon Memoirs and Life Links and all that it does with detours, and how we learn all these things about Kiryu, like how he reflects on the characters and the games he's played, and like how he talks about how so much of his life was him putting on a mask and pretending to be this cool stoic guy when he really is just a goof, and he wishes and had regrets and wishes he could do that more. And then we see him goofing off in maybe my favorite scene in the whole series, singing Judgment with Namba, Seonhee, and Psycho and Kashiwagi. The way that the side content integrates with the story, it's a wrap, man. It's a wrap. It's my favorite side content in any game for what it means for Kiryu. And the way this game just tackles so much. I can't believe how much is in it without it feeling bloated or like it's spinning its wheels or not knowing what to do with itself. It absolutely does with both storylines, both thematic through lines. But it's crazy because I'm in the final act and I'm getting ready to fight like Bryce or Ebina, and then I'm just like, this game started with Ichiban at Hello Work asking Psycho out on a date. I can't believe how far we came. So
seriously,
it does so much. The side content's amazing. The gameplay, it's like in terms of gameplay evolution, it is the perfect sequel. Much like the way that Rebirth, I think, expands upon and builds upon everything with the gameplay and compared to Remake, this is very much the same. Maybe even to a greater extent. It does so much. It adds so much. It makes it so difficult for me to ever think of replaying Like a Dragon 7. As much as I love that game, on the gameplay side, it's going to age badly because of Infinite Wealth, you know?
Definitely.
But like back attacks and the way that your bonds can influence team attacks and the integration between story and gameplay, and then not randomly, but how Kiryu can just... The reason Kiryu is playing turn-based is because Ichiban has made him see things through his hopeful worldview. But then Kiryu reclaims himself through turning it into through the I forget what it's called, but when you turn it into an action RPG for like 30 seconds or something, where he just swings on the gun. I forget what it's called, but you know what I mean. Maybe the best gameplay story integration I've seen ever through how it does that stuff. And then little touches like very minimalistic, but like Majima's role is really, really good to me. I think it's great. I think that the story, obviously, Yakuza 0, I think is Majima's game, but I think up till Kiwami 2, he was magnificent. I think they kind of didn't really know what to do with him for a little bit, and then Like a Dragon, Gaiden, and then Infinite Wealth, I think he's great. He's minimalistic, but he's so good. Daigo made me so emotional. Daigo's so great. Date, man, what?
Don't even get me started on Date, bro. Date, what a goat! What a goat, man!
Unbelievable. This guy made me weep, and I was another character who I'd be like, Date, please just take care of Haruka once in your life, please. Seriously. I would make fun of him.
Seriously. And
now I'm crying about this guy. I can't. It's crazy. The lifelink with Kashiwagi, the stuff with Haruka where Kiryu isn't able to see her, but it doesn't matter.
Tears.
Tears. And this game elevates every game before it. I quite
agreed.
I quite literally think it elevates every game before it. It's a love letter to Kiryu, to the whole saga, to everything before it. And it elevates every character. It's crazy. I just talked about we talked about Kiryu, Ichiban, Majima, Daigo, Date, but every party member. Psycho they do a lot of really interesting things with Psycho that some people don't like, but I think it's actually really great stuff for her. It requires quite a bit of, I guess, empathy for her side and for Ichiban's, and I think a bit of analysis of her karaoke song as well. But Psycho is amazing. The way it elevates Seonhee and gives her and Kiryu this adorable dynamic where not only are they just really cute together, but Kiryu sees in her his younger self and gives her such advice.
Precisely.
Zhao and Kiryu together are so good.
So good.
I love them. I love them. And then Namba is improved so much. The way that he does so much for Kiryu to try to make it so that he isn't counting down the days, but is celebrating whatever's left. And that very human moment where he tells Seonhee and Psycho, like, I'm so glad you guys are here because I was kind of struggling under the pressure of this. It's so beautiful. And then for Ichi, so all of that happens, and it is so great for Kiryu, but the only reason it can be so hopeful and so optimistic, and the only reason Kiryu can fight and reclaim his name, is because of Ichiban. Kiryu, I think, is the main character if you're gonna pick one. But Ichiban is just as important as Kiryu through being just the ultimate support character. What Ichiban does is incredible. For Kiryu, for reflecting elements of Nishiki through himself, like a sort of good end of Nishiki in a lot of ways, very meta. Through his dynamic with Chitose, amazing. I love her.
She's in my top 5 favorite Yakuza characters, I think. I loved her so much.
She's unbelievable. And she is literally, it's so easy to tell. She is so inspired by Nami. She has her Straw Hat moment. She has her coming of age. She joins the Nakama. Everything's there, but all obviously her own character. Chitose and Ichiban's dynamic is so beautiful. I love Adachi in this. Even Jungi, who comes in late, has some fun stuff. And Tomi's fun. I like Tomi as well. And Yamai. I love Yamai.
Yamai's so good, dude.
This cast is just so stacked. And Yamai is he an antag? Is he not? One of the best performances I've ever heard by Koyasu.
Definitely.
And then how he just takes inspiration from Ichiban and Kiryu by facing the brunt of his sins and taking it all on and letting go and moving forward into the future. And kind of how that encapsulates the entire story, which is being weighed down by the past and things you might regret, and looking at it all, but being able to, in a lot of ways, embrace all that it is, all that it represents, all of your past as a part of you that you may be ashamed of in some ways, or you may not be happy about, but accepting it as part of yourself, taking responsibility for it, as Kiryu does with Ebina at the end, and moving forward. And and essentially, kind of similar to what we were talking about with Fullbring, having to break the cycle with illogical, at times, forgiveness, just like Kiryu begs Ebina to do, and Ebina is just so taken aback by that. Just as Ichiban forgives Eiji. This man who would never be able to forgive him for what this guy did. 99% of the world, maybe every single person in the world except Ichiban, would not be able to do what he did in that beautifully allegorical, honestly bizarre walk at the end, which is one of the most, I say bizarre, but I mean that in the most complimentary way. That is a scene that will stick in my mind forever, because it is so... It's so strange, because Ichiban is so strange. He's an anomaly. Someone like Ichiban shouldn't exist, but the fact that he does is why Kiryu has faith in the future, and why he can have hope. And then at the end, all these internal struggles of who he is, who he's been, the future going forward, learning to accept and forgive and embrace himself, how Ichiban represents all of that, and the dynamic between Ichiban and Kiryu, which is my favorite in the series.
Definitely.
And then at the end, we have Kiryu still fighting. He had given up before, but he still fights, and he reclaims his name, and he says, "I'm Kiryu Kazuma," and it ends. And I finished it a few weeks ago, and it's already aged incredibly well. That's straight up one of the best games I've ever played, and I'm just in awe at it. It feels like a game that really shouldn't exist, but it somehow does.
Dude, Beautifully said. Infinite Wealth is so special for all the reasons that you just mentioned. Because you can think of, like you said, that ending sequence. You can think of what they do with Kiryu there at the end. But then you can also think of how much fun you had playing Animal Crossing and Pokemon in the thing. It's just it's such a crazy game with so much stuff that at the end of the day comes back to the amount of fun that you have with the life that you've been given. And it's so well structured from the very beginning of the game with Ichiban and then cutting over to Kiryu and then how the two of them meet up and the way things go from there. It's just everything felt so intentional and it's just it's so brilliantly done. Going back to your comment earlier on can't believe that something was able to, or at least like waiting to see if something could match up to Zero and this being the one to do it. I had a very similar moment where I in the like halfway through, I think it was chapter 4, whenever Ichiban and Kiryu have like their first official chapter together. I was just sitting there like, oh no, this might be my favorite. I was even that early on. I was like, it's just everything has just been so well done, dude. And just to talk on Kiryu, because obviously I love Ichiban with every fiber of my being, but Kiryu, I've been with him for so many years now, starting Yakuza all that time ago, and it was such a beautiful game on the Kiryu side of things to see him finally overcome many of the things that have been mainly many of the things that were internal that he's had to overcome and now forced to overcome now that he's face to face with death. And just seeing how that, like you said earlier, how that was brought into the gameplay with him and both the side quests that were in his particular section, as well as the bond that he built with his party members. And it got to the point where even though Kiryu has had so many incredible characters on his journey, all the way from Zero until now, with many different supporting cast members, and I can't imagine Kiryu without Sionhee and Nanba and the characters that were there, and even most of them came from the Ichiban section, and it's just that's how brilliant the game does it. It's like it's as if we experienced Gintoki in the war and saw everything that he went through there, saw the Shoyo stuff, saw the stuff with Takatsugi, and then in this final game we see him with the Yorozuya, and we see just how much the Yorozuya helped him move forward. That's what we got here with Kiryu, and it was so beautiful, man. And I think what Infinite Wealth does so beautiful is, or that does so well, similar to Rebirth, is that it captures what makes video games fun, while at the same time what allows the medium of the storytelling medium to hit as hard as it does for the individuals who really love that stuff. It showcases what it could be at its peak from a fun standpoint, as well as what it could be at its peak from a storytelling standpoint, and the way that it just interweaves those two things is what allows Infinite Wealth to be truly one of the greatest games ever. And it's kind of crazy we've got multiple of those this year. But listen, man. You have do you have at least 30 minutes with me here?
Oh yeah, I got more than that if you want.
Okay. So I just, it's Trails, man. You know what I'm saying? People listening to this out in within the world, y'all know how much I love Trails. This is something that means absolutely everything to me, and I've been fiending for every time that AJ posts an update and hits me up in the DMs for some Trails, for some Trails greatness, because this series is one that anytime anybody embarks on the journey, I am always feeding for the reactions to certain things, what characters end up resonating with them, what game or what arc or whatever. I'm always so interested in hearing how others feel about certain things. But because, of course, AJ and I have been doing these for quite some time, and I obviously absolutely love hearing his thoughts on many of my other favorite stories. So I knew when the Trails Greatness would come eventually one day, I'd be like, yo, what I get from the Bleach streams, I'm gonna get for that for Trails one day. What I get from the One Piece conversation, I'm gonna get that for Trails one day. So it's been so beautiful. Similar, exactly how it's gonna be for Final Fantasy 14 in the other way. Whenever I finally get to experience it and I get to share those thoughts with you, that's exactly how I feel every time you share the Trails stuff with me. It has been incredible seeing your thoughts from the end of Sky SC, ever since you restarted the journey with Sky SC up until now with the end of Cold Steel 3. Just a big spoiler warning for anybody who's about to watch this in regards to Trails, because I know there's some people that haven't played it yet. We're about to talk about in-depth spoilers from Trails in the Sky FC to the end of Cold Steel 3. For anyone that one day wants to embark within the series. But AJ, I just have to ask, man, before we get into specifics for any arc, I have to ask, how has the journey been up until this point? And just overall thoughts on the Trails series now that you've had the great reset, and have now embarked on the journey once more and have been on it for quite a few months now. But how has that been for you, and any standout things that have like stood on your mind in regards to the journey itself?
Yeah, it's been so fun. It's been lots of fun. And it's also been, we're talking about my experience with Yakuza and Bleach and One Piece. And in the past, we talked about, Naruto, Metal Gear Solid, whatever. Those are a lot of games that that I've streamed. But we've also talked in the past about games that I feel that I just get more immersed in playing on my own. Like Rebirth is one. Trails is another. Something about it just feels to me like an experience just for me. Obviously, I share it, and I'm going to talk about it with you now, and I can't wait to get into the nitty gritty with it. But like while I experience it, it's something that that just feels really, really just for me alone. Just headphones in. I played most of it on my Steam Deck, but sometimes on my computer.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, so it's been lots and lots of fun. Like you kind of alluded to, I started first chapter ages ago. I don't know how many years ago, but it was a while. Maybe 2019, 2018, 6 years ago, something like that. And I played the first one, and I really liked it. And I think for the vast majority of people, it's going to be near the bottom of the list just because of how it evolves from there, and it lays a lot of foundations. But I still enjoyed it quite a bit, and the ending just sucks you in and makes you want to keep playing and get into the next bit, which basically every game in the series does that. It's kind of crazy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I started second chapter, and for some reason, just life stuff got in the way. I just had to stop. I had to pause. And then I was paused for like 4.5, 5 years. And then, but talking to you got me back into it, and I went, you know what? I think I'll give it a go. I have time during the week to do it. I can accommodate it. Let's do it. So yeah, I got into second chapter. I finish it, and I'm like, that was very cool. I don't know when I'll play the third, but this is good. And then suddenly one day I just went, you know what? I think I want to just do it. Let's just do it. I don't know when I'm just going to do it, and I don't know when I'm going to stop. I'll stop when I get burnt out, I guess. Played through the third, played through Zero, Azure, hit you up about the order to play them in. Cold Steel 1, 2, 3. I haven't hit any burnout. I'm a couple hours into Cold Steel 4 now, no burnout whatsoever.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we could talk a bit about that as well. But
let's go.
If we're just talking generally for the series, it's been so much fun. It's been so much fun. It's been full of great characters that I just find myself entranced with the more time goes on. And it does that thing that great long-running series do, where it knows when to bring characters in, when to hold off, because you don't want Estelle and Joshua coming back every game.
Precisely.
because that's, you lose the impact of it. You get habituated. But it knows exactly what to do and when, so that you just get so hyped when you see someone. Like, I started Cold Steel 3. I saw that Randy was an instructor.
Yes, sir.
I lost my mind. That was so cool. I was so happy to have him back. Randy's one of my favorite characters in the whole series. And to have him back in this role, especially with what's going on with Crossbell in Cold Steel 3.
Precisely.
Yeah, I love that. And then we can talk about Cold Steel 4 later, but just to touch on it really quickly, like starting Cold Steel 4 and then just seeing Joshua, Estelle, Ren, Kia, Lloyd, and Ellie as well. There as well was the sixth one.
Yep.
Man, I couldn't believe it. It was crazy. And Ren and Kia are grown up. Oh my god.
Yes.
So I think one of the best things that the series does is the way it knows exactly how to use its characters. Yes, the temptation must be there with a cast as big as this to bring in the characters every game, but they know that's not how a great story is written. You got to be tactical with it. You got to go head over heart sometimes. I haven't seen Kevin properly. He was in some games after the third. He had a bit of an appearance, but I haven't seen him properly in ages, and I miss him. But look at all the stuff that's going on right now. I don't need him in the series. Don't shoehorn him in. So yeah, it just has great use, deliberate use of the characters. The music is just all consistently amazing. I play it in my streams all the time, like we were talking about. The mysteries that bubble over, the overlying narrative that is always in the background, that's been there since the beginning, is really enticing and just builds upon itself. And just the ability of it to keep things fresh, and build the world. And I think when I hit Cold Steel 1 and 2 around there is when I properly began, like I started loving the setting in Zero with Crossbell, and how it sort of represented a lot of our characters and Lloyd's sort of psychological stagnancy. How it's this in-between zone that's in between these two great nations that is neutral, but one side wants to do one thing, another side wants to do another. It's just stuck. There's genius thematic integration with that in the characters. So I started loving the setting through Crossbell like that, but I started loving the world through Cold Steel and hearing about Crossbell and what was going on simultaneously during that time. We know what's going on with Lloyd as we learn about Reen and his classmates. And so yeah, I love that. And just the last thing I want to touch on generally is just the characters we get every game. It builds upon the characters, but every game gives you new personalities to really dig into and really love. Joshua and Estelle really carry forward the series from the start, but Olivier's always there and he's always a joy. Cassius is this great influence. And then we get to there's other characters as well, of course, in the antagonist section as well. But then we get to the third, and Kevin just shoots straight up as I think at this point. I don't know exactly for sure, but he might still be my favorite character. I absolutely love him at the moment.
He's so good, dude.
Reen is. We'll talk about Reen later, but Reen is making up ground rapidly. But at the moment, I think Kevin's still my favorite at the moment.
Respect.
But then the influence of Rufina and the minor characters in this series. Okay, I'll hold off for now. But so we have Kevin and we have Kevin and Reese. Just this amazing dynamic. I would die for these two. They're so great. And then it celebrates it sort of celebrates the entire trilogy up till that point, through the goodbye at the end, which is one of my favorite scenes in the whole series. Then the whole new cast in Zero, the SSS, love all of them so much, and all their intermingling motivations, and Lloyd and Guy with the Gurren Lagann scene.
Yes.
And I gotta say it because I talk on my Discord and Twitter a bit with some fans of the series, so I get a bit of a finger on the pulse of certain characters that people really like. But I think I might be one of the biggest fans of Dieter in the world. Like,
Okay.
I think Dieter is such an interesting character and such a, I guess, such a personification of I guess the state of Crossbell and an example of the way this sort of cyclical, I guess, war, in a broad sense, leads to rises in power and falls in power, and people being exploited and people exploiting others. And I think that Dieter is an example of every side of that. He exploits so many people. He puppeteers so many things that are heinous because of his plans that date back so long, but born of an aspirational need to have power in a situation from which he has none because of the whole Crossbell situation. Like, it's great integration there, but also he uses that drives him up, and then he uses that power to exploit the people. And he's a great sort of political. He's a sort of Togashi-esque character in the way what it says about the sort of political themes here. But then he's exploited by those. There's always a bigger fish, and he's the one exploited. It's like he can never break free of those shackles that he's been trying to be free of. Even when he comes out on top, people then use him. And there's just so many great nuances about him. I think he's great. I really, really love Dieter. So I just wanted to draw attention to him as well. But yeah, the Crossbow Saga, amazing characters throughout. And then Cold Steel introduces us to Reen and Class 7 and Crow. I told this to you, but my trio of favorite characters in Cold Steel 1, and also Cold Steel 2 actually, is Reen, Crow, and Eustace, who are my three favorites.
Boys.
I love them. I love them so much. And there's also some great stuff for characters like Machias, who has a great dynamic with Eustace. It's just an awesome cast for Cold Steel 1 and Cold Steel 2. But then I don't know what happened, but I don't know if you can relate to this, but with Cold Steel 3, like, maybe they, because they narrowed the scope from the really big Class 7 to the more focused cast, where it's not like they skip out on giving you fun NPC dialogue for the like Freddy or someone like that. But they really just, there was something in the writing sauce for these new characters that made me so enraptured from the start. Like, I fell in love immediately with Yuna, Altina, Kurt. We knew Altina before, but this is where we really get to know her. Kurt, Ash, and Muse is cooking for me. I'm starting to see the vision with Muse. But those four in particular, are so good. I was immediately in love with them. I wanted to know everything about them. And then it builds upon Class 7 really well as we see them all grow up. And Randy and Tita, it's so Tita and Agat are back, and and just a couple things before I turn it over to you. I also really, really love the dynamic with Eustace and Rufus. Who I really like Rufus a lot.
I'm so glad you're saying that, dude. Rufus, I freaking love Rufus.
I think he's so good. I think Rufus is amazing. Sorry, in Crossbow I didn't mention Waze and Arios. Those two, I also love those two. I just need to mention that. But also, Rufus is great. He's fantastic. Also love the direction they go with Patrick. Patrick's my guy, man. Patrick's my guy. Man. And also there's a character that is very me-core in the sense that he's very easy to hate, and if you don't really try to see things from his perspective, I think you could really just want him off your screen. But I really like Cedric. I think Cedric's great.
Fantastic.
It all stems from a really interesting, complex psychological situation that makes him act the way he does. But at the top of it all, Gileath Osborne. Who I still I honestly don't really know the core of him. We know that he's Reen's father with that crazy cliffhanger at the end of Cold Steel 2. And we know that he used to be very different to who he is now, but there's a big gap there that hasn't been filled in. And last I've seen, Rena's in chains or something. In the incredibly raw opening menu art, incredible. And Osborn's doing something with him. I don't know what. But yeah, he is probably the character that has my attention the most at the moment. And I really like him. I think he's great. Also, shout outs to Lecter, who has been with us for ages. And we just, at the end, towards the end of Cold Steel 3, you learn his background, and it's super interesting, and I really think he's great. But yeah, anyway, that's my ramble.
I think that's my favorite, ramble I've heard this year. Let's go, man. Listen, it's so much that brought joy to the soul. Before I ask you a question I was going to ask you earlier, I just want to touch upon the Osborn thing real quick. Going back to similar with Beatrice and Eisen in regards to the presence on screen. Dude, Osborn's presence from the very first time we see him in the Sky Trilogy, and then through Crossbell, and here in Cold Steel, he has both from the voice acting in both English and Japanese, and the actions that he takes. There's just something about this dude that's put me in the game, coach. I understand why so many people follow you and why so many others respect you. I get it. Even though you've done so many things, they make me want to Celestial Dragon Punch you. I get it, man. I get the rawness. I get that you have a plan in place that only Olivier from back in Sky the Third can possibly outwit. He just has that type of aura to him, to use a better term for that. He is. I love Osborn, man. He's definitely one of those characters that from the moment that you meet him, you're like, I see. This series has one of those characters, one of those all-timers. But going back to whenever you restarted the journey, and you talked a little bit about it earlier, I wanted to hear more about your cooking there with Rufina, because obviously we had a conversation about this before, but as much as I love Sky SC, and I really, really love that game, Sky the Third is my favorite in the trilogy, and it has a lot to do with concluding a lot of the characters' journeys from that particular section, and that, like you said, that final farewell, which is absolutely beautiful, as well as the doors that give you so much insight into the lore of Trails and into the Void Century, if we could call it that, into the mysteries of Trails and things like that. But the main reason why I love that game as much as I do is because of the relationship between Kevin and Rias, and in particular, how those two bounce off of Rufina, and how the world itself changes because of Kevin attempting to overcome all of that, whether it's overcoming his grief, overcoming himself, multiple different things, and how the world and the gameplay changes. It's the most unique game in the series in regards to gameplay because of that. It's a dungeon crawler rather than being a normal thing that we normally see in every single game, and it's because it's exploring his psyche. And I really appreciate it for that, because not only does the moment call for it, but once you get into the later stages of that game and you have to come face to face with all the individuals that Kevin has taken out throughout the course of his journey, it's like, oh my goodness, you're getting further and further into the depths of not just the hell within the series, but the hell in his mind, where it's like he has to overcome all these things again. But what's so beautiful about this series and about this game is that is whenever he goes into the final one, which we all know he would never be able to do by himself, when he's face to face with Rufina one last time, and there is no way. He did it to Weissman, he did it to all of the other ones on the way to that final battle that he'd taken out before, and even though it hurt him, it's like, if I have to put him down again, I will do it, and I'm going to bear this burden by myself. But he couldn't do it against Rufina. And what's so beautiful about this game, and it's building the relationship between him and Rias, and about the trust between the two of them, and you get to that final scene, and Rufina helps him pull the trigger, similar to how the Beatrice and Battler stuff happens in episode 6. And so it's such a beautiful game that at its core is so simple in its message, and of course an individual who is trying to, he has like the Shinji Hedgehog's dilemma thing where he's trying to keep people away so he doesn't end up hurting them or vice versa. But as Rias comes closer to him and he allows Rias to come closer to him and the both of them are able to do that deed, it's one of the most emotional moments in the entire series, one of my favorite moments in the series, that set trails into like that next level for me, where obviously when I finished the end of Sky SC, I was like, oh, this series is definitely hitting all-time potential for me. It just had an incredible shonen manga arc in video game form. But Sky the Third was the first time that I was like, oh man, this series has like something really unique to say from both the gameplay style and from and in terms of its story. And so that was a huge one for me, and I know you were just talking about that being the one that really got you kickstarted in the journey. So I wanted you to cook there in regards to Sky the Third and the Rufina stuff, because I heard you say you wanted to talk a little bit about that. So please cook on that, because I love the relationship between those three characters.
Yeah, it was, if I at the moment, if I were to say my favorite game in the series so far is Trails to Azure. But if I was to say,
great pick.
Thank you. Yeah, it's close. But if I was to say the most important game, it would definitely be Sky the Third, because it's currently my second favorite at the moment, and it's close. But yeah, because I don't know, there's something in the way it not only wraps up the arcs of the characters at that point in a way that is fulfilling and comprehensive, but it makes me, for the majority of them, feel closer to them, feel more emotional about them, feel things about them that I didn't really feel when they were going through their arcs throughout first chapter and second chapter. I don't know exactly what it was, but the way that the game executed the ends of their stories was just really affecting and emotional to me. Like the door that was the party, that whole thing was so beautiful and so affecting to me. Ren's door. I mean, I don't need to say anything about that.
Oh man, no.
That is just unbelievable, like gutting, gut wrenching. But all that stuff's fantastic, but really the core of it was that trio and that dynamic that you were talking about. I really love stories that lately I've been brain rotting over stories that kind of in and of themselves are creative works of art that for which the design of their world, or rather the design of their narrative and different elements of the narrative are meant to reflect a character. So like character pieces achieved in a really creative way. And that's what Sky the Third is to me. It is Kevin and for example, I think Gaiden and Infinite Wealth are both examples of this in the Yakuza series. It's similar like this for Kevin, because once we hear that this world that we're in is a reflection of a lot of the feelings and the self-criticisms he has of himself, the feelings of inadequacy, the way he shames and blames himself, it just becomes that much more intimate, and it just makes his relationship with Rias, who is, as you go through the chapters, you get more and more about their upbringing through these little scenes at the beginning of each chapter, and they're immediately engaging and endearing as a partnership. But in the final act, as it sort of dawns on you what this means, their relationship is just elevated. I found myself so enamored with the two of them and feeling every line of dialogue they shared and every action they had together. And indirectly, Kevin doesn't need to say anything in the game, because once we learn about what's happened to him and what this place represents and the way that quote-unquote Rufina acts, this antagonistic Rufina, we know how he feels about himself. And that is, it was just incredibly emotionally presented. But what really got me was the way that Rias just stuck with him no matter what. with some tough love at points, with some words of comfort and warmth at others, depending on the situation, and was just the perfect person to be there with him. There was no one else who it could have been. I don't want to think about what would have happened if Rias wasn't with him there. But I don't think he would have made it out. At least not in the way he did, and found himself reborn and came out of it with a new title. So with Rias then allowing him to see the beauty in himself from her perspective, because I love when stories do that, where someone cannot see anything in themselves but negatives, and then through the support of loved ones or friends or whatever, they see through their eyes and realize, maybe I'm not so bad. Maybe I have some things I can be proud of. And she kind of, it's not quite that drastic, but she kind of does that for him. And that then lays the platform for him to confront this version of Rufina. And then that gives him the platform to properly find himself, forgiving himself through the kind words of Rufina. I love Rufina primarily because, have you played Amori? I don't remember, actually.
No, I have not. That's actually on my list.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I want to play that.
She reminds me of a character in Amori, but I won't say anything more than that. But actually, she reminds me of Guy Bannings, actually, from the Crossbell arc, in that they are this sort of guiding light, this sort of spiritual essence in the narrative, for whom the characters they affect can at times feel pressured by them, feel very negative by them, by what they imagine they might say, by feeling inadequate in one way or another, or regretful. In Lloyd's case, he was always comparing himself to Guy, and then realized he was his own person and he can be proud of who he is. In Kevin's case, he just could not let go of the idea that his weakness led to Rufina's death, and that she would blame him about that. But we are, in situations like that, we are our worst enemy. And what really prevents us from being able to move past those things and forgive ourselves is our inability to see what the truth really is, like the simple truth. It's nothing new or crazy that Kevin was taught here. It's just he was able to see past his self-hatred, to see clearly and realize, of course, she'd never blame me for this. She loved me, she protected me, and she wouldn't take that back, and she wants to see me and Riaz live and be prosperous and live in joy. So I think it's a beautiful tandem, because Kevin he outwardly has this really sort of actually something similar to Randy, which is he acts very jovial and lighthearted, and he covers up his inadequacies and insecurities and self-hatred with that sort of persona and mask. But that's the foundation, that self-hatred. Riaz helps him get through it and realize that he has some value. And then the memory of Rufina and all that she stood for and her genuine self is what helps him realize that, okay, maybe I'm not in love with myself, but maybe I can become someone I can be proud of. Maybe I'm on the path to loving myself, even if I'm not there yet. And I love the honesty as well. It's not that he suddenly goes, I'm a fantastic person, because a lot of the times that's not true. That's not how we feel about ourselves. But she helps him realize the path towards self-love through seeing him through her eyes. And there's something so unbelievably beautiful about that really struck me, and it's something that hasn't been replicated since in the series, and I don't think it ever will, because it's simply unique. It could only really exist for Kevin, for Riaz, for Rufina in this narrative, and that's the heart of it. That's the core of it. I love what it does for the rest of the characters. I love the different doors. I love the gameplay. I found it so cool to just be playing with like a cast of 20, 25, to just have
so cool.
Vander chilling with Olivier in our party, and then Joshua and Estelle, and then Ren. I love all of that. That's all great, but it's supplementary to the core of and heart of why I love it, which is those three.
Dude, thank you. That was beautiful. I could not have said it any better myself. Absolutely, just what a masterclass from Kondo and the team for creating such wonderful characters. I like to say that Kevin has my favorite form of like long form character introduction, where you see him, or I should say, my favorite example of long form character introduction, where you get to introduce the character at the beginning of Sky SC. You're like, who in the world is this goofball who continuously keeps following us around, and we don't know anything, of course, about the grander narrative at that point. And so by the time we get to the end of the game and we see, of course, that he's a part of the church, and we get to see this serious side, we're like, what in the flying flatter is going on? He was just given like the most important role in the entire game, which was taking out Weissman after what happened in at the end. And so immediately we're like, oh man, like I want to see more from this Kevin guy. And what does Kondo and the team do? They're like, hey, next game, it's not going to be with Estelle and Joshua with the leads. It's going to be about Kevin Graham, that goofball church dude from last game. I'm like, what a great and crazy pivot after Sky SC. It's one of those things that, like you said earlier, is we expect it out of our long form stories, but you don't expect it from a video game, which is all. It's all dependent on sales and on people following a journey going from one game to another, and that's why so many games don't do the long story stuff, and instead go for episodic stories that can be digested in one game. That way, people can jump on to the next entry. So, Sky the Third really was like, oh no, they're really in it for the story. Obviously, they're trying to make money, but they're really in it for a grander vision, which is super, super cool. To touch on something that you said earlier in regards to this being the most important game for you in regards to the journey and what it presents to this Trail series as a whole, most certainly has that Skypiea-esque feel. As a matter of fact, we talked about this before, but Sky the Third is my Skypiea for Trails. Mm-hmm. It's like the heart and soul that is the themes, everything about the series always ties back to that game. Now, Zero and Azure, moving into that is, I've always said it's the Water 70s lobby of the series, more ways than one. Obviously, Water 70s lobby, that's such an important arc for me with One Piece, because every single one of my favorites has one thing in common, where I have to ask the question, will it peak again? Right? Like, there you have the first peak when you get to Sky SC, and you see that the payoff from the cliffhanger in FC had not only an incredible payoff, but payoff that far surpassed anything I could have ever imagined. And I was like, okay, we peaked once. Now, can we do it again? Sky the Third happens, and it's like, okay, we peaked again, but that was just in one saga. Can we do it whenever there's brand new characters? And right off the bat, I loved the SSS so much, due to the point to where this was in the middle of COVID, and I was working for a delivery company at the time, because those were some of the only ones that were that offered employment in that early period of COVID. And so I was doing deliveries, and all I could think about was the fact that I was doing special support section quests in real life. And so I was doing these things happily, because I was like, yeah, I'm a part of the SSS, and I'm being legit with this. Like, it was such an important part. And when the world was going crazy, I had like this backbone of I can still do good when everything is going nuts, and do these deliveries. Like, I genuinely had those thoughts thanks to this game. And so going with Lloyd Bannings in the squad, and they did such a great job with not only having all these characters, specifically the main core four, be introduced at the same time, but the way that all of their stories unfold throughout both games, but in particular in the first game, where we get fed more information while certain things are still kept hidden, while you're getting incredible reveals for each individual character, and more importantly, having their relationships and their dynamics with each other continue to blossom and flourish throughout the game, and as things get crazier with the Mafia and things of that nature. But what really, really sticks out to me in Zero, and then later in Azure, is how Trails masters the form of short-term storytelling and long-term storytelling at the same time, which is why I think the series has lasted as long as it has. Because in the short term, we're building the SSS for something that can allow us to be really connected to these characters. That for whenever the end game comes around, we'll be invested in the fact that these guys are trying to save their city, and we of course want to help them, and we're invested in the mystery and all of those things. But then we get into the next part of that, which is the long form storytelling. And the long form storytelling here is that we have been building a Ren who has had a connection to Crossbill from Sky SC. And so when you go over to Sky SC and you see the characters that Ren are first introduced with, and you're like, obviously we don't think of it, nothing of it at the time. We don't even know who Ren is. But as the game progresses and you see everything that's going on with her and with Ouroboros, it's like, okay, there's something really off here. Then you find out who those characters were in Sky the Third within the door. And you're like, okay, no, we're really cooking something here with Ren. And then their promise is made right then and there that Estelle and Joshua are going to go after her, and they're not going to stop because they love her. And it's such a beautiful thing, but you're like, okay, let's see where that leads up to. And it leads into some of the most emotional stuff in the entire series that to this day is still my top 5 favorite moments ever in Trails, which is whenever we get to the end of that game, and obviously it's everything's going to chaos, and we're finishing this massive great battle. But as Ren comes in at the end, and Estelle and Joshua are there with her, they finally do the deed. They finally catch her, and Estelle delivers the line like, "I finally caught you," and there's a really powerful moment there between the three as a family, where Ren does not want to accept it, but she succumbs to it because she realizes that this is what her heart wants, to the point to where Potter Mater says, "Screw you." Like, I have to put you down. I'm sorry, Ren. I know that you're my master, but I have to go with what my master truly wants, which is to be with her family. And when I saw that moment, when I saw a game that had me so immersed in this brand new location in Crossbell, which was already like a new home to me at the time, and with all the characters that are here, with not just the main cast, but the supporting cast, I was like, I love these characters. But then you give me long-term payoff for the characters that we just met. That for me was like, oh, I'm here forever. I am here forever. And then you give us, right before that, the Kia stuff with the auction house sequence, which was very similar to Wall Market, and I loved it for that. But whenever you get into Azure and you get the payoff to that, in its own form of long form storytelling, that arc truly was when Trails not only peaked again for me, where I was like, okay, no, this series is capable of peaking again, but it was also the moment where I was like, man, if this series can do this twice, then I like, my faith in them is to always be able to pull it off, no matter how much I'm gonna miss these characters. And so Azure was really, really important to me. And before I pass it on to you and your thoughts on Crossbell, there's a particular section in Azure when Lloyd is by himself. We're going back to Ichigo and the Fullbring, where of course he was relying on so many other people, and Lloyd, being the leader of the SSS, was also relying on the others with him. He's a very good, like, Luffy-like leader in that regard, where he'll be like, yeah, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this, but what I can do is do this. That's very Lloyd-like. Mm-hmm. And Lloyd was placed in a situation where he was in prison with Garcia, and he didn't have anyone else with him. And so you as the player, you're like, well, I mean, so many things are going down right now. The twists and turns are happening. Like, poor Lloyd, he's going through so much. But then Garcia and him escape prison in one of the most hype moments ever created, and it leads into one of the coolest character moments for Lloyd, where you see him as the representation of Crossbell, being like, screw all of that nonsense. I am going to get us out of here. We're going to free this place come hell or high water. And I'm going to get Kia back. And so we get this really beautiful Enies Lobby-esque sequence where then the squad gets reunited and they roll up. And by the flaggers, we're getting her back. And I think one of the greatest parts about Azure is that entire final sequence where he comes to terms with what happened with Guy, and so does Arios with that particular sequence there, and we get those the truth of what took place there, but more importantly, the emotional impact of that. And for going back to Robin and earlier on the podcast, and like being rewarded for just living and persevering, Lloyd's reward for persevering and sticking with all of this and believing in Kia to the end is not only a moment with his adopted daughter there at the end, which is so emotional, but then he has a moment with Guy too. The closure he needed with Guy to like carry everything on, to no matter what happens, which as we know, thanks to Cold Steel 2 and Cold Steel 3, a lot of stuff was incoming for Crossbell, but because of that sequence with Guy Bannings, he and everything that happened there with the SSS and the bonds that they built together, and now that he has Kia with him, it's like, I don't care what happens, I'm gonna ensure that we move forward, and that Crossbell will one day be freed. I don't know if it'll be today, I don't know if it'll be tomorrow, but one day it'll be freed again. And it was so beautiful, that especially since Crossbell and Cold Steel 1 and Cold Steel 2 took place at the same exact time. It was one of those really beautiful things of, this series knows exactly what it's doing, and I have full trust in them to be able to pull off a lot of the things that they're setting up. And so I know you talked about Azure being your favorite earlier, but I wanted to ask why that is the case, because obviously it most certainly was my favorite for whenever I first played it as well, before I played Cold Steel 3. And then of course the ones that came after, but in that particular duology, Azure is just, it's a 10 out of 10 game, and still one of my top 5 favorites in the series. So I just wanted to ask, like, what resonated with you in regards to that game, as well as like your thoughts on Crossbell. I know you talked about it a little bit earlier, but
so yeah, a lot of things about it resonate, and I remember for a great deal of it I was thinking that it's such a well-rounded experience. It does a lot. It does so many things, and I love it all. But will it hit the heights of the third? And I was going, maybe it'll stay my second favorite, because it's really good and well-rounded, and it's really great in every way. But will it hit that emotional height? I don't know. But then we hit that final scene, the Gurren Lagann scene,
yes,
with Guy, where Lloyd comes to terms with, like I said before, with the fact that he shouldn't be looking at his memory as pressure or someone to live up to, or to be someone he's not. And it all sort of clicked for me that the entirety of Zero into Azure, he'd mention Guy, and he'd talk about how my brother would do this and my brother would do this, and sometimes it would be really good and healthy. But a lot of times, I kind of overlooked the fact that it was kind of him, this constant panging anxiety of, oh, my brother's good at this, my brother was great, he was my hero, he could do this, and I'm not quite that good. It was this constant self-demeaning, this self-criticism that constantly just dragged him lower and lower and lower, and made him feel more and more inadequate. And it all kind of clicked for me in that scene that that's what he was doing this entire time. And so to have that dawn on me, and then immediately after that feel as if this is it, this is his answer, and he's going to move forward. While going through all of it, and just, well, I'll get to that in a second, actually, but that just hit that emotional high in a different way, but on a similar level to Sky the Third, and made me go, okay, this is the peak emotion stuff that maybe would have put it below it, that maybe makes it my favorite now. So there are those emotions, and rescuing Kia, and also, like you mentioned, the SSS. God, they're so good. They were such a breath of fresh air, and all 4 of them are so great in different ways. Learning about them, and then the relationships within, and just how they became this ragtag crew, all of them so deep and with their own nuances, and who go through so much together, their own different types of trauma and motivations that intermingle, and then they fight for they fight for the future of this world, not to find the answer, but to just make there be a future where they can potentially find the answer. Which is in this world, yeah, they don't succeed and they don't solve everything, but you can't just solve everything by winning one battle, you know? It's not realistic. It would actually be, I think, a flaw of the series for at the end of Azure, for them to just suddenly everything be solved. You know, we know the answer. Everything's good. Crossbell's fine. Like, no, that's not how this world works. In some other stories, maybe it would happen that way, but not the way they've established this setting. So, yeah, they fight just for the chance to look forward, just for the hope. And we see immediately that things go bad. Like, immediately. In Cold Steel 2, horrible stuff is happening. Cold Steel 3, horrible stuff's happening. But they just hang in there, and they fight for that chance. So, there's all that. That's great. The cast in general, the SSS, and the cast surrounding them is so great. But the thematics about the setting, I kind of touched on already, are so interesting. The setting theme integration and how that integrates with Lloyd. Again, Crossbell being this in-between area. People fighting over it. It being this sort of vacuum in the middle of these two gigantic nations that use it as a tool. And the people within it, some siding with one side, some siding with the other, it being in conflict with itself, and just generally, people within it not being able to find a way to progress forward, and how that reflects with Lloyd, and how that reflects with Randy, who hasn't been able to move past his Jaeger past, and see himself as a human being worthy of love, Tia with her past, Ellie with her, all the stuff that's going on with her family, like, all that stuff connects directly with the series, with the setting. So I thought that was so great. And then the way they find an answer, while also all the characters find an answer, was super good. But also, I think there's something very intelligent with the way that that the antagonists are used. Because we have, how do I put this? We have, her name's escaping me, Maribel? Bell? Right?
Yes.
And she is the classic, pretty shallow, she doesn't have a ton of depth to her, cackling, mustache twirling, if she had one, villain, right? She has this grand plan, she's over the top, cruel, maniacal, and sadistic, you know?
Yep.
That's her. But then we have a lot of characters who are very, very nuanced and uncommitted. We have Arios, who had his whole relationship with Guy, who had this great relationship with him, who said that he as good as killed him because of his inability to help him find the answer that he was looking for, which ultimately leads to him being shot by what's his name? What's his name again? The lawyer?
Yeah, it was Ian Grimwood.
Grimwood, right.
Yeah.
Shot by Grimwood. And then Arios goes along with his plan for the sake of his daughter, but his heart isn't in it. He's doing it for the end results of it. Because he can't see a hope in the world where his daughter is happy and thriving and healthy with things as they are now, and he's tried to do it the honest way. Guy tried to do it the honest way, and he realizes that doesn't have an answer for him. So he's doing this because of the results it'll bring. We have Grimwood, who essentially just gave up. He was never evil. He was never really someone who fully bought in to the ideology that he was standing for. It was just that he found that answer because every other answer he tried to come to, he could not find an answer anywhere else, so he defaulted to this. But the moment that Lloyd breaks through to him, he immediately goes, no, like, I see what you mean. Yeah, I'm on your side now. Like, he was begging to be broken through to. He wanted to be on. He wanted to think the way Lloyd does. He just never had the hope or the strength or didn't see things from his perspective. So when Lloyd is able to communicate it to him, he immediately changes his mind. It actually reminds me a lot of Pain from Naruto.
Yes.
Because it's not that he opposed Naruto because he wanted to and he isn't actually like him at heart. It's just because he wanted a way forward and all of the hope never led anywhere. So he gave up. Same with Grimwood. We have Dieter who commits to this one thing, but isn't isn't all in on the plan that Bell is in for. He doesn't really know what's going on. He just kind of wanted to seek an answer for the years and years and years of not oppression, but I guess a sort of subtle oppression. And this is the answer. All these antagonistic characters, and then there's also the Jaegers they hire, Randy's family.
That's right.
They're just there because of the paycheck. All these characters, none of them are committed to the ideals they're fighting for. They're just doing it for the end product. And so I love that. I love that none of them are committed, because it shows that this setting, Crossbell specifically, was in a state for which no one knew the answer, and it was full of people who just wanted it to prosper. They just wanted it to be a prosperous place. They wanted what was best for Crossbell, but it was so oppressed, and it was so overpowered by so many other things, by Erebonia and Calvard's war, by all these other motives of powerful people, that it never saw the light of day. And so these people would resort to things that didn't reflect their heart, but they had to do anyway. But the moment that Lloyd helps them to see another path forward, they go, okay, yeah, I'm in, you know? Arios buys in, Grimwood buys in, the Jaegers, they were never committed in the first place, and Bell just goes away. So I love how the motivations of the antagonists and how they're contrasted by Bell in stark contrast. She's the only one who buys in. Really reflects the state of the setting, and how in a lot of ways there is at heart not a huge amount of difference between the motives of our protagonists and our antagonists. Of course, the antagonists, they do things that are in a lot of ways unforgivable. You shouldn't, bypass the sins of what they did. But the fact that they did it for very similar reasons that the protags do what they do, I think says a lot about Crossbell and the rich thematics at play here and the character motivations, and it all just really impressed me. And that sort of really nuanced writing is something that I really eat up, and I just love the way it all concluded. I heard I talked with some people when I finished it, and it's not for everyone, the sort of conclusion it brings about. But for me, it's super up my alley, and I think it's really elegant, really intelligent theming. So yeah, that along with the cast, the emotions, all that, it's just the full package. It's the quintessential JRPG. It just hits on every level.
Agreed. Beautiful answer. Very, very well said. A quick side note as we transition into Cold Steel. So at the beginning of Cold Steel, you start off similar to Trails from Zero, where you start off with Regan and the squad. You don't know their names yet, but you know that they're in the middle of a mission, and then you go out and you see the Crossbell, but in 3D this time. You're like, holy fuck, what is happening? Then you realize what's actually happening from a different perspective. But then you start off earlier, exactly the same as you did in Trails from Zero. Now, of course, we know that in Zero and Azure, this led into one of the craziest twists I've ever seen in a game, which is that in Azure it's revealed that the SSS died.
Oh, how did I not mention that? Yeah.
Dude, that is one of the craziest twists I have ever seen in any game.
Unreal.
Like, it was so wild because you really don't expect a game to go into that much attention to detail for that kind of stuff, but when it did, and as the moment is playing out with Kia revealing, like, so in the middle of you going up the elevator to the final battle, you start seeing all these like images and sequences of that day, and you're like, wait, what in the world's going on? Then you start putting the pieces together, and you're like, there's no way. There's no way. And it's like, yeah, they all died and she reset it. I was like, what? So then, of course, that leads us into Cold Steel, which when the game started, I was like, oh no, what? Like, are we about to see like what happened before that took place? And so that was my first insight that the events between between the Crossbow duology and the first two Cold Steel games were linked, and I had never really seen that done before within anything, but in particular within a story of this length outside of like novels that really go into detail in regards to point of view and how individuals see certain events through different lenses. And so when you get to the end of Cold Steel 2, and because obviously at the end of Azure you see like the stuff with Osborne, and it pretty much tells you what's about to happen in Cold Steel 1 and Cold Steel 2. And so when you see from the other side of things of like, okay, what actually took place in Erebonia, and then after, of course, all the craziness with Reen and Crow and all the peak fiction that took place there, you cut over and you see the legendary sequence between the meeting of protagonists, which is always going to be my favorite thing in anything, where it's Reen and Lloyd in the room. Which, by the way, man, that's one of the most hype scenes ever. When you cut back and you're playing as Lloyd again in 3D in Cold Steel 2, it's like, yo, what in the world's going on? This is peak. And then they got the old music and everything. But then you fight against Reen, that moment for me is when the light bulb started going off as a favorite of mine in regards to Reen Schwarzer, because before I give you the floor for the first two Cold Steel games, the thing that really sticks out to me with Reen, and why I'm so glad I played Metal Gear in particular before before going through this journey with Reen Schwarzer, is that, and why I specifically was talking about in the character video, why viewing it through the lens of Solid Snake really allowed me to appreciate Reen with every fiber of my being, is because when the Reen and Crow stuff happened in Cold Steel 2, and Osborne immediately comes in with the reveal, the only thing I could think of was the big boss stuff at the end of Metal Gear Solid 3, where like directly after him having to do something he didn't want to do in a battle that was absolutely insane for Reen, being able to fight alongside the man, and then go have to fight him, which was what the whole game was leading towards, and then fighting alongside him before the Vermilion Night. Then of course Crow dies in his arms, and you see a moment there with Reen where it's like I don't really know what to do, and then his brain gets put into mush even more when Osborne reveals that he's his father, and then he really starts questioning reality. And so what I appreciated with the transition into Crossbell is that we were able to see a different perspective of how the rest of the world sees Erebonia, but in particular, because we'd just gone through 2 games with Class 7, we were like, okay, we know these guys throughout the whole series. In the Liberal and in Crossbell, we've heard about how crazy Erebonia is, and how they're this like not necessarily a villainous nation, but they've always had like an aura of darkness hanging over them. Now a lot of crazy stuff has happened there. And so when you cut over in Crossbell and you get to see one of the individuals who's really doing this is RMC, is Reen, but we know he would never do this.
Yeah.
But then you get to a point to where you're thinking, no, he's got to be so conflicted right now because of what just took place. So it's like then there's the soldier's mentality going back to Solid Snake, and how these characters have to go on these on these missions. And that's the self-deprecation of themselves and believing them to be only tools used for it. There was just so many things there that I thought of in regards to Reen in that moment where I was like, oh my god, this guy that I originally thought was just going to be Naruto and Ichigo in one person ended up being another version of Solid Snake. I was like, yo, this is awesome. I've never really seen this before, so I really came to appreciate what they were doing, not just with Reen, but with the rest of the characters at the end of Cold Steel 2, because obviously that final section is extremely long, and there's a lot to be said there in regards to what they could have done. But what I do appreciate with the end of Cold Steel 2 and the parallels to the end of Cold Steel 1 is that both games end off on the most important things to Class 7, which is the relationships with each other and what that means to not just themselves, but to the overall thematic resonance of the first 2 games, which is the togetherness that these characters have and the bonds that they share with each other, which is why I think it's so beautiful that both games end in parallel to each other, and why I'm so glad that the second game ends in the way that it does, because even though the character is obviously we will see them again in Cold Steel 3, in that moment we don't know what the future has in store. Reen is not graduating with them, and so when they say goodbye, and to them that is their goodbye. Like, this is their last hurrah. I look back to, like, me when I was in high school and, like, the friends that I had, or that I still have, but it's similar to, like, with the Cold Steel 3, where you get to see them again. It's like, oh, we're still buddies and whatnot. But there's others where in that moment you don't know if you're ever going to see them again. Like, it's that type of small world, especially in a world of pre-social media. It's like, I never know if I'm ever going to see these individuals again. And so I love how in a setting about school, and the bonds that you make there and the memories that you make there, the final battle is that, like, it's a proof of the bonds that they've made there, and only because of those bonds can they overcome this final challenge. And then, as of course that ends, we now have a question of, like, then what now is going to happen to all these characters, and in particular, what is going to happen to Reen? And so I pass it over to you, because Cold Steel 1 and Cold Steel 2 are the weird ones in the series, where they're either at the bottom or near the bottom half of a lot of lists, or there's a lot of people that really, really love these two games. And I feel like Trails is such a unique series where you could have it at the top half or the bottom half, people will understand, because it's just certain things resonate with certain people. And so I just want to know your thoughts on Cold Steel 1 and Cold Steel 2. And what resonated with you there. I know you touched upon it earlier with certain characters, and how the school setting and stuff like that ended up working with you there. And I apologize for keeping you this long.
No, I was totally ready to be here this long, so no worries. I was expecting it. I'm down to talk a while more to get all the thoughts out there about the Cold Steel games. So no worries. I guess before talking about them as a whole, what you talked about with the ending of Cold Steel 2, and what I really love about that, I'll talk about Reen, I guess, in a bit, but what I love about the ending itself is that, now, I really, really, I'm not a fan of certain things to do with that ending.
No, I understand.
It's a lot of, I think, probably a lot of the regular complaints you probably heard about it, or critiques of. Mm-hmm. I love the twists with Crow's death and then Osborn being his father and all that. I'm like, oh my god. But then the thing is, when you get into the state of, okay, the game's wrapping up, you're kind of on, like, high alert, and, like, this is hype. Wow. Oh, and emotions are high. You're really, like I said, on high alert. But then the game just keeps going for a long, long time. I really like the Lloyd section. That was cool. But then after that, there's, like, another free day, and then there's another dungeon, and it's like, man, this should have ended. I'm exhausted. Yeah. Like, mm-hmm. So I think that's a genuine flaw. But despite that,
definitely,
at the end of it, what I love about it is that what you said, because they literally fight a shadowy Hulk that tells them straight up, if you fight me, it's pointless. There is no point to fighting me. But they do it as a proof of their bonds, of how strong they've come together. There doesn't need to be a point for it aside from a proclamation of how far they've come and how strong they are and how they'll continue to look for an answer into the future. So they make their own meaning with that. So I really love that part of the conclusion, and all the frustration prior to it with the music playing and the sentiment of what they did. I was just like, okay, it's worth it. It's fine. So I really like the conclusion of that. Cold Steel 1 ends off with a classic cliffhanger sort of thing. But my feeling on the games in general, Cold Steel 1 and 2, is that they're towards the end, the bottom of my list as well. I've played 8 games, and Cold Steel 2 is 6th, and Cold Steel 1 is 7th. So they're near the bottom, and it's mostly because I just don't. I think intentionally they're not as ambitious as a lot of their predecessors and successors.
Right.
They're very slow, and I don't mean this as a criticism, but they're intentionally slow Even when, stuff's hit the fan in Cold Steel 2 and everyone's scattered everywhere, it's still pretty slow paced. They laid the foundations, I think, for 3 and 4. And maybe whatever's beyond that. Where you get introduced to the political situation in Erebonia, you get introduced to Osborn, Olivier's role, Reen as a character, Class 7 as a character. But what really made me... And they lay foundations in their build-up, and they're meant to be slow and a bit more low-key in comparison. And I have some problems here and there, but the main reason why they're lower on the list is just because I think that's, again, a great amount of restraint used here to realize, okay, we need to kind of set the table. We need to lay the foundations, and that's what these games are. Now, does that mean that build-up can't be peak? No. So, of course, there are things that can be improved upon. But I look back at those games very fondly because I think they do build up well, and I love what they establish. Right. And I mentioned Crow. I think he speaks for himself. He's awesome, and I love, in particular, I really love the way he views his own death.
Yes.
He's such a simple guy in the sense that Osborn caused great tragedy for my home, for my family. So naturally, I want to kill him. That's it. And he tells Reen, it's not a sob story unlike anything you ever heard. There are stories like mine everywhere. There are hundreds throughout Erebonia. I'm not special, but I'm going to do something about it. I want to do something about it. So I love that simplicity. And then it coalesces at the end where he is dying and he goes, well, that's just how it goes. No regrets. I knew this was a possibility. It's happening. Yeah, that's it. I love that self-awareness and accountability. Now, what the hell's going on with him now? I don't know. We'll see. But whatever's going on with that, we'll see. But I love Crow in the first two games, and the mystery of what's going on now, we'll see. Eustace, like I said, strikes me as the star of Class 7 in terms of his upbringing, his relationship with Machias and Rufus and Reen.
Totally.
It's all awesome. Great establishment for Machias, and I love the setting. I just love exploring the towns and the cities and the music and the immersion. It's so comfy. And you mentioned the school setting. It's so comfy. I just love...
It is.
You can tell they were kind of trying to be a little Persona with it. But it's not that
100%.
It's not that it doesn't have its own identity. Despite that, it's absolutely its own thing. And I had lots of fun just on free days, just walking around, exploring, talking to every NPC. It was so comfy. It was so cozy. I really, really enjoyed it. And and with Reen, I really liked him. But I'm with you in that the turning point was the end of 2 into the beginning of 3, because
definitely.
He's good, and he's generally just a good boy, which endears you to him. But there's also some nuance with his sort of self-sacrificial nature. How others say to him, you do so much for other people that it's scary, and you should probably take care of yourself. Come on, man. Yeah. So there's stuff to that that's really interesting. But all in all, he was a very good main character that never really was a favorite. Until the end comes, and he just completely breaks, and we see him from the perspective of Lloyd, and he just looks like a drone, like a soldier, like you say, like Metal Gear Solid. Yeah. With the way he breaks upon that revelation, I found it interesting because I actually played Rebirth before it. He reminded me of Cloud a little bit, like Punished Cloud from Rebirth. So yeah, and the Snake parallel's really very apt. And so it's crazy because his personality, he is just following orders. His very kind, compassionate personality is not there at all. He's just there with Altina, just doing his job, saying what he should be saying to enemies of the state, And he's very cold about it. So it's from their perspective, our guy Reen, you understand why he feels like an enemy, but then, because Lloyd is who he is, he can sense something deep within him, right? So that's great.
His emotional intelligence is incredible.
Yeah, so it's great that he's able to sense this, but the average person who would see Reen is just you can't blame them for seeing that through him. So that really hooked me for his character about where he'd go. And then I gotta say, Instructor Reen, this is teasing a bit of Cold Steel 3. I'll just say really quickly.
Go ahead, by all means. We're about to transition into it anyway.
Yeah, Instructor Reen is, I really like Student Reen. Instructor Reen is a whole other level. Him being able
100%.
to pass on all the stuff he's learned, his experiences, to these students who look up to him for guidance, and their relationship is kind of prickly at first. They don't really like him. Yuna is very, I don't know if I should... She has a lot of complexes about him, having to do with what he did in Crossbell. She doesn't like what he represents. Kurt doesn't know if he should respect him at first. Ash is really rough around the edges with him. And Reen's style of teaching is kind of he has some very tough words to say. But it all works out because he knows he's been in that position a couple of years prior, and he knows what will help them grow and mature and progress in their own individual ways. And he's just this fantastic instructor who goes so deep into the lives of these students to invest himself in them and try to do what's best for them and be a significant part of their lives. And that just spoke so much to me. I was shocked at how much I loved him as an instructor compared to as a student. I was just shocked at that. So that's my, I guess, little teaser for Cold Steel 3. But yeah, overall, really like the first Cold Steel games. They just, because of their role, they're near the bottom of my list, but I generally really like their structure and what they do.
I'm right there with you in every single regard. In regards to placement and in regards to overall thoughts. Just two quick things in regards to the first two before we move on to the next ones. One of my favorite dynamics in the entire series is I was about to say Luffy is Reen and Valimar. I really love Valimar as it sort of reminds me of an Ichigo Zangetsu sort of of dynamic where it's like the more they find out about each other and their relationship, not only the stronger they become, Soul Society style, but also the deeper the bond goes. And I really love their dynamic, and just being in a Gundam is super cool. But the way that they handle it, especially in Cold Steel 3, and Cold Steel 2 and Cold Steel 3 in particular, is super super cool. And then I'm a huge fan of Emma. I really love.
Oh
Emma.
Yeah, Emma's great.
Both from the mysteries of Emma in the first game, trying to figure out who this character truly is, but then once you get her stuff with Vita into it's super super good. And not only is she the most broken party member in battle, but she's just a great character. I really love Emma. But then we get to the big one, bro. Listen, man. Anytime somebody gets into Trails, I'm like, okay, one day they're gonna get to Cold Steel 3, and that's why I always hope that people play the games in order. And I've watched a lot of people when this game came out on Switch, because we still don't have Cold Steel 1 and Cold Steel 2 on Switch. But when Cold Steel 3 came out on Switch, because it's the most sold Trails game by far, this one and Cold Steel 4, which is kind of crazy. That just tells me people played these two games and haven't touched the other ones. It's kind of like the Final Fantasy 7 of Trails, which is kind of wild to me. But so there are people who have just played Cold Steel 3 and Cold Steel 4 and love them for the not even knowing. I can't even imagine that, not even knowing the stuff that truly makes the game special. But I guess that just goes to show what makes Trails games so good, which is they tell a really good short-term story and a fantastic long-term story at the same time, which is what makes a lot of these games work. But Cold Steel 3 for me, I love what you said in your first tweet about Cold Steel 3, about it being the best start to a Trails game. I'll never forget the day that I started Cold Steel 3. I had just come off of... I had the day off work for the final stretch of Cold Steel 2, and I played all of that, and I loved it. I was like, oh, this is awesome. But Cold Steel 3 was the last game I had before I caught up. So I was like, I want to take my time with this one. And I'll never forget, the first frame in Cold Steel 3 is you looking at Arianrod from Azure. And I was like, what is it? What is going on? And then of course you see these brand new characters, and I was not expecting brand new characters. I was like, who in the world are these people? So you're playing as these characters you've never seen before, and they're talking about Reen as this instructor, and I'm like, bro, what are we doing? And then obviously we get a little bit of a sneak peek of what they look like now and everything. But then what truly hooked me more than anything else, and it's why this is my comfort game, even though I have 3 games higher than this one on my personal list, which are some of the games to come. But it's my comfort game and the one I revisit the most because of the vibes. This game is so vibes. You talked about earlier about like school vibes. This game is hardcore vibes, bro. It's so good. Like I love everything about every town, the other school. I love everything about this game. Like it does something to where right after the initial prologue sequence, when you get to the school and you get to see my girl Toa, my beloved Toa Toa. And then you get just crazy nonstop back to back. You see Patrick again. You see Tita and Agate, and you're like, holy flagnards, what's going on? You see, of course, Valimar again, so it's like, okay. And you see how Reen is still the same Reen, but he's definitely, you see the impact of how Cold Steel 2 has really affected him. But then you get to see, like, Randy and the boys like, yo, what's this? Then Aurelia shows up as the principal. You're like, what in the world's going on? And so I loved the sort of, we're against the main campus, like it's us against the world dynamic we had here. I was like, oh, this is very Bad News Bears. Like, I like this so much. Everybody here is supposed to be a delinquent or someone who was rejected by the original school, so we're gonna create this campus of rejects. And I was like, I love that concept. That is such a cool idea. And so when then you take that to the next level, the rejects of the rejects are Reen's class. So the last 3 that were not picked are, of course, Kurt, Yuna, and Altina. And the entire time you're like, is that really Altina? And by the sweet mother Flagnars, it is. And so, by the way, Altina, one of my favorite characters in the series, and what Cold Steel 3 does for her is sensational. Mm-hmm. She has my favorite soundtrack, or top 5 soundtrack in the game, which is the Pancake on the Way Home from School.
Oh, I love that one.
Such a great soundtrack. Definitely in the top 5. But so then you get them, and you get the moment for me that I always say is like the moment that Trails changes forever, which is when Aurelia says, meet your instructor, meet your new instructor, Reen Schwarzer. It'll be him. And it's like, yeah, from then on, my family was created. I love New Class 7 more than I can ever put pen to paper or whatever, man. You talked about this earlier in regards to the differences between the original Class 7, New Class 7, in terms of size. And they were very intentional with that. I think they started off with a huge class with the first 2 games to sort of, since they were so small with the first one, with just being 2 characters, Estelle and Joshua, then they made it big with Sky the Third, while still staying to the core 1 and 2. But then they stuck to 4, and then in Azure they brought in like Wazi and Noel and whatnot. But then once you get to Cold Steel 1, it's like, man, it's a huge roster. And I love all those characters. But then you get to Cold Steel 3, and it's like, oh no, like this feels right. Everything feels intentional. The ways that they're trying to get adjusted to each other, while at the same time trying to adjust to Reen, and how that unravels, and the mysteries, both within the grander narrative and in the short term with each arc, continue to unravel with their dynamics with each other and with Reen. It is so well done. And once again, with the long-term storytelling stuff, this game, it was the first time that you truly felt that everything that you have done in the series is legendary. Like, the fact that everyone is doing their hard, like, whatever they can to keep Estelle and Joshua from entering is like, oh man, they're legends now. Yeah. Same thing with Lloyd. They're like, we're going to do everything possible to keep Lloyd away from Crossbow because we know what he can do. And it's like, dude, everything that we did in those first 2 sagas is now like, we're feeling the impacts of that. And so staying in line with that, when you go on that first mission, you go to Hamel and you see Hamel for the first time, and you actually see in the music.
Yeah.
You see, dude, and then they pay respect to Louve, and it's like, oh, I love this so much. This is so peak. But of course, the game continues. We go to Crossbell, and then we get to the most Recon Core chapter in the history of video games. A chapter that brings real shonen together with Wall Market, which is Chapter 3 of Cold Steel 3. This chapter, it's not my favorite chapter in Trails, but it is the most Recon Core, where it is a chapter that this is the chapter when Rin became my favorite character, and this is the chapter when class 7 became my favorite cast, and this is also the chapter that has my favorite boss fight up until this point, which is on the roof piece section of it when you have Aurelia versus Aurelia and Rin versus Arianrod, which is like the most real shonen you could ever get in literally anything. But the moment that made Rin my favorite character, it was like a sort of build up. All right, so the entire game, you're building towards Rin's relationship with his class, with his students, as you were just alluding to, and what he's learned throughout the course of the entire Cold Steel 1 and Cold Steel 2, and how he relates that with his characters. And there's one character that, even though he's so different to himself, he sees a lot of himself, and he sees a lot of his classmates and problems that they had with each other. Everything that he's learned on his journey is like all encapsulated within Ash. And so as the game progresses, you see in their relationship, you seeing that he just recently ended up joining, so now he really has an opportunity to see him eye to eye. And even when he wasn't in his class, he was still like keeping an eye on him, making sure he was good. But now that he was in his class, it was like, man, they get their first real interaction where Ash is like doing some shady stuff outside. And like I said, this chapter is filled with so much great stuff with Muse, with Yuna, with Altina, with every new Class 7 character. It's just great here. And Rin, right before this, has the moment where he takes off like I call the Hollow Mask for the full Ogre mode to go up against Arianrod, which was built up throughout the course of the entire game. He was like, I'm not going to allow myself to be taken over by this thing. And when he felt the biggest threat in the entire series up until this point, right in front of him, the thing that took the entire SSS just to stop, he was like, no, this is a living legend in front of me. I got to, not only do I have to protect my students, but I also have to protect my pride. It was that Bleach thing. So he's like, I don't care. I don't care if I lose myself in this fight. I got to fight her. And right after that, he has the moment that made Rin my favorite character, which is when he has that conversation with Ash. And he tells him, like what each individual member of New Class 7 has in their role. Yeah. It's like that Luffy Arlong Park moment where he's like, I can't do this, I can't do that, but I can do this. And Rin has that before his students, where he's like, I know all of my students, and I know that they're trying so hard to do all of this. He even talks about Muse in a really, really funny fashion here. But in regards to Ash, he's in particular, it's just such a beautiful scene where he's like, it's just, to put it simply, you have a place in Class 7. Like, I know that your life hasn't been roses and whatnot up until this point, but I just want to let you know, if you want a place to be like home, and I know that Raquel is this and that, and what happened with Mom is this and that, but I just want you to know that if you want a place to call home, you have a place here in Class 7, and I promise you that I will do whatever I can to be able to help you out there. And that just sequence right there with Rin and Ash is truly what propelled him. Like you said earlier, Student Rin, I really rocked with him because that's my guy. But Instructor Rin, throughout the course of this entire game, but especially from that moment onwards, I was like, dude, you are my guy. Like, I love you, man. That was not only a speech to Ash, that was a speech to me. And I really needed that at that point in time with what I was going through. And so obviously the game progresses from there, and we get some of the best moments in the series after that, and a crazy cliffhanger. But Rin's relationship and dynamic with his students is the core of this game, and is one of the reasons why I think this game works, even for people who don't have the context of the previous games. Because I think that's just a strong core part of Cold Steel 3. And so, as we wind up this podcast, talk to me about Cold Steel 3, thoughts on the masterpiece that is Cold Steel 4, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts on all of the incoming stuff, but in particular for this thing as we sign off here for the ending, or I'm sorry, for the Cold Steel 3 as a whole, and the beginning of Cold Steel 4.
I love that you point out that scene, because that's one of my favorites in the game, and it very much encapsulates why Instructor Rin. Obviously, they're not different people, but this phase for his character is just so special. Right. It's all the stuff you said. It's all the stuff I was talking about beforehand. He's just a fantastic mentor, using the things that he's experienced and learned, and not all of it bright and happy. The painful things too, and then passing on what he's learned to those that he so deeply cares about. because he does. He cares so much about Ash, and that's why he says that. But Cold Steel 3 in general, like I kind of said earlier, the moment you start it, it's just like, okay, Cold Steel 1 and 2, they're good. I really had a great time with them. But they're cooking with different sauce for this game. Like, everything about it is different. And there's something, even just like, you're right, the vibes are insane. The character work for New Class 7 immediately hooks you and engages you with the characters, and you really love them. But the free days, even just the free days, they've never been that comfy. They've never been that full of amazing vibes. I love just going to the bath and having a talk with Randy in the bath, and he comes out, and then the students are just cooking in the kitchen. I've never enjoyed slice of life in Trails as much as I do in Cold Steel 3 by far.
Agreed.
It's like by far. I would just have when I play for, I don't know, 1.5 to 2 hour sessions or so usually, and I just have like 3 or 4 of those sessions on a free day and the surrounding days, just going about the town and talking to people. It's just so immersive and so great. And throughout all of it, you have the bonding bonding moments or scenes. Yeah. The events, yeah. And I think those take a step up too. Like,
yeah,
the ones with Kurt, where he has this, he needs to live up to his family, and he has this problem with being his own person and having his own identity, and how Reen helps him with that every single bonding event. With Altina, where I'll never forget the event where Altina is like, I need to draw art, but I can't, but I don't know, like, I feel no emotion. And she goes, and he goes, and then they're talking a bit, and she goes, you know what? I think I do have something I feel about. Let's do this. Let me draw you. And I just teared up immediately. Like, that is such a beautiful, beautiful bonding event. And then the ones with Muse and Ash are great in their own ways as well. And Yuna, and the way she has really quite a complex, I guess, quite a complex outlook towards Reen, because I love Yuna. I think her whole thing with being from Crossbell, but then and then having such strong ties to the SSS, and then being here in Erebonia, and I'm glad that she had Randy and, to an extent, Claire as confidants. But obviously, as anyone in her position would be, she's bitter. She's in some ways grieving for the loss of her home, and she hates it. She hates being here. She hates this country at first, but then she slowly realizes that there are people within that are good. That not everyone is like that, and then specifically for Reen, how he's the one who saved her. Her and her siblings. He was a sort of symbol of Erebonia's oppressive regime over them, but then he also saved them. And so Yuna had this complex about being too weak to protect her siblings on her own, and therefore resenting Reen due to her envy of his strength, and also just having complex feelings about his allegiances and what he stood for, and gratitude, but also hatred, and it's just so complex and it's so great. So yeah, all that's packed into the beauty of the slice of life segments, the bonding events, the character arcs. Then you add to it old faces coming back: Tita, Agathe, Randy. We have Tio in this game, which I'm so glad about.
Yes, Tio.
We have old Class 7. And then we have that. My favorite chapter is actually Chapter 2. I really love all of them, but my favorite's Chapter 2 with Crossbell. Just a quick shout out to Hamel and the notes about Joshua and Luve and everything. And the music there, it's just so good and so nostalgic. But seeing Crossbell and the scene in particular where Yuna says on top of the tower, why are you
give me my Crossbell back?
Yes, why are you trying to take away our pride? Give us our Crossbell back, the free city where anyone could dream. And what I love about that is Reen just takes it. He knows, he takes her hatred, he thinks he understands it, he accepts it, and he just lets her lash it out. and it's not solved immediately. She spends a day or two just doing nothing, just depressed, and thinking about how she wanted to thank Reen the whole time, talking to Kurt and Altina, and then but then Reen leaves her a message where he says that the special support section are all heroes, and they're all great people, but you admire them, and obviously that's great, but are you going to stay like this, or are you going to become your own person? Are you going to take after them and use them as inspiration to be a great person like them? That's your challenge now. And that in itself is such a great reason of why Reen is just this amazing mentor figure that I love so much. So I love the whole stuff, all the stuff with Crossbell and all the scenes there. But I love everything throughout the game. I love Ash's role and how he gets overtaken, him being exploited through his the tragedy by this curse, and then becomes this example, an excuse for martial law and all that stuff that's going on with Osborn. It's so sympathetic. It's so incredible for Osborn and him and everyone who aligns with him and the Steelbloods. And then there's, but the thing is, it's the game with the best atmosphere, with maybe my favorite music, the best slice of life stuff, in the conversation for the best character work. But the thing is, it's the first time I've experienced a Trails game where I feel like I need to play the next one to know how I feel about it. Whereas, like,
I gotcha.
Like for first chapter, it ends on a cliffhanger, insane cliffhanger. Yeah. But it still felt like I knew what my feelings about it were. Same with the cliffhanger for Cold Steel 1. I'm just like, okay, we'll see where it goes. But this game was in and of itself a full experience, and I don't need to see where it goes to know how I felt about it. This is the first time in the series where it ends so abruptly. It's like the anti-Cold Steel 2, where that gets dragged out. It's just like, oh my god, it's done?
That's right.
Where there's so many things up in the air. We have George betraying everyone and being part of the gnomes. I don't know what's going on with that. Angelica, no one knows what's going on with her. Is Milliam dead? I guess she sacrificed herself for that. Olivier, Toval, and Laura's father, Victor, all seemingly died on that. I don't know what's going on with that. What the hell's going on with Crow? Where's Reen? And how are we going to continue forth? Like, Muse is shrouded in mystery. So how are we going to continue forth all these arcs? It has the most things and threads that need to be concluded. And so that's why it's a high favorite. It's third on my list right now. As long as those things get concluded adequately and I can look back on it and be like, okay, they were cooking for sure, and I know it for sure because I know where it goes, it might go ahead of the third and become my second favorite. Yeah. But where it stands, it's so undecided that it's hard to know how to put your finger on how I feel about those bits. It needs to conclude. But I thoroughly loved it. I loved it so much. And the beginning of Cold Steel 4 is so promising. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, dude.
We already talked about how we have all the crew back together. And we see the Ren and Kia grown up, and Ellie and Lloyd, and then Joshua and Estelle. And that's so great. And the imagery of Reen in shackles, just this punished Reen. And I've only played a little bit after that. So I'm controlling Yuna, and I'm in the forest, Aaron.
Yep.
And I've just went around and talked to all of the old Class 7, and man, that is rough. It's Eustace is grieving Milliam. That his and Milliam's relationship was really, really beautiful.
Definitely.
But he's grieving her, and there's this line from Laura where she goes like, "It's all gone to hell. Have I learned nothing? Have I not grown at all?" Because she has this whole thing with her, with growing with Reen and becoming this great swordsman and becoming this great leader in person. And she has this moment of weakness that I really love. And it's not, the vibes are bad. The vibes are awful. Everything's in disarray. We don't know what's going on. But so where I left off is I talked to everyone in the forest, and we're supposed to have some sort of meeting to see what the plan is going forward. But the start was really great, and I have no idea where it's going to go. But I'm hoping for more Reen Peak, Great Osborne stuff, Great Crow stuff, whatever's going to happen with that. Just, it feels like with the way they started with this, with those characters, this could be encapsulating of the entire series in a big way. So I'm really looking forward to that. Oh, and one more thing about Cold Steel 3 is the scene where they're going by on the train and they see Lloyd and they do the fist bump in spirit. Yeah. Oh my god. That scene extracted tears from my eyes.
Same. Yo, I'm so glad you brought that up. I can't believe I didn't mention that. That's one of my top 10 favorite trail scenes, bro. That scene right there was like another one, long-term payoff coming into fruition. Like after everything that both of them had gone through, and after they fought each other, Lloyd was like, "Yo, I get it, man. Like, yo, take care of business, bro. I'll be right there, brother."
Yeah, like, he did the Ichigo. They fought, and any regular person would assume that Reen is not a good guy, but he saw his heart through their fighting, and he realizes we're on the same side. We've got the same spirit. It was so good.
Yeah, man, dude. Oh man, good lord, bro. Like, yo, Cold Steel 4. That it might have like my favorite prologue, just prologue in general, just because of of seeing those characters again, be able to control them. Like, it was like, oh my god, man. I after all the build up in Cold Steel 3 of like, yeah, if these characters come here, we can't allow that to happen at any costs. And then you have the legends, the ones that you've been building all these for all these games, like, you're playing as Estelle again. You're playing as Lloyd again. And the way that it's done is so genius too, because you're going around the world and you're getting the reactions to what took place at the end of Cold Steel 3, and then you see Shara, which we haven't seen Shara in years at this point. And Shara's like, pulls up the phone, and you're like, oh snap! Like, what in the world is going on here? Like what? And then you see her bring up the phone, and you hear the voice, and it's like, there's no way. And you cut down into the tower, and you see flipping Lloyd and Estelle running. Like, no way! Like, this is peak. But just one more quick note before we wrap this up. In regards to the section that you're in, and you were talking about Yuna earlier, and the Reen thing, and to like not being strong enough, and stuff like that. I think that's why when we cut over into Eren, and we're controlling Yuna as like the main party leader there, I think it was so important that it was her because of everything that you stated earlier. Like, she was the one that specifically looked up to Reen, because she felt that she wasn't strong enough to protect what was important to her. And now that we see that they're placed in a situation where that is once again taking place, it is a beautiful moment of characterization for her, of being the one to take the role of like, nah, I'm gonna be the leader right now. It's so beautiful, and I love how the game puts that into your hands right off the bat, because I'm sure every single person who's starting off Cold Steel 4 is like, what happens now that the individual's been the main party member for 3 games up until this point? We don't know what's going on with them. But Cold Steel 3 established throughout the entire game that Reen is passing on everything that he knows to his beloved students. And so it feels just right that the ones you're controlling as everything's going to chaos at the beginning, in that Eren section, right whenever you exit from that sequence, is new Class 7, in particular is Yuna. And I really, really love that decision from a creative standpoint. Just going back to what you were saying earlier. So yeah, man, very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the upcoming greatness. I love that game with every fiber of my being. So I'm excited to see what you end up thinking about it, and in whichever way, shape, or form, and of course all the greatness that comes after. But dude, I have to thank you. We've been recording here for 3 hours and 52 minutes, and I do appreciate you, and thank you for being patient with me. It's definitely it was one that's been a long time coming. Obviously with the Bleach stuff, with the Yakuza stuff, with the One Piece stuff, and with the Trail stuff. There was a lot to discuss, and so I really thank you for your time, brother. If you have any final thoughts before we get out of here, where can people find you, and what do you have in the streaming plans here in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, of course. No, thank you. Sorry for part of the reason we've been going so long is because I just keep yapping.
No, I love the yaps. I love the yaps.
But no, it was great. It was tons of fun, and I was very much looking forward to it, and I can't wait for the next one where we'll have stuff to talk about with more Trails games, I imagine, more Bleach, Arcane, mayhaps.
Yes, sir.
Also, I saw you love Metaphor, so I don't know. I might be playing that kind of soon. So that's a great segue into stream plans.
Let's go.
So Bleach will continue on Wednesdays. That'll be going for a little bit while longer, including movie days. So we'll be watching some episodes of the anime. So those are Wednesdays. I do want to put in I'm feeling nostalgic for Naruto, so I'm going to be doing some a Naruto movie day someday soon. But there's that. Sundays we have the Hunter x Hunter and One Piece reads whenever they're available, as always. And Mondays we're currently going through Ace Attorney Apollo Justice, and then after that we could be looking at stuff like Devil May Cry, Metaphor, Red Dead Redemption 2. There's a bunch of different games in the pipeline that we could be doing. More Ace Attorney, who's to say? But Metaphor is one that I definitely got my eye on for a potential stream game. So I'm really interested in that. And yeah, I do want to add a fourth day into the streams, and I do sometimes. But I'm coming towards the end of finishing my Rebirth video, so I'm really locked in for that. And then once that's done, maybe we'll be able to do 4 streams a week more often. But that's the schedule for now.
Dude, now as the number one Rebirth tard here in the entire planet, you have no idea how excited I am for that video. So the moment that drops, that will be in my. I don't care if I'm in the car or if I'm at work. I'm gonna put it into the to watch list. And the moment I get back into the car, we're throwing that thing on, man. I am so excited for your Rebirth video. Obviously with all the stuff we talked about earlier this year, but
appreciate it,
but
man.
In particular for that,
it's gonna take a few car rides. It is a monster, so
it's okay.
I hope it's.
I watched the original one, and that was also a monster.
Oh, bro, this is almost triple the length. It's 9 hours.
Oh, perfect. So, dude, that's exactly what I need, bro.
Great.
Listen, man, we for Rebirth fans, all we need is more Rebirth. Look, if there's anything that we learned from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, is that the longer the better for these games.
True.
So yeah, it's super excited for that, and obviously for the greatness there. But yeah, man, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to the next time we're able to do this. Hopefully, whether it be next month or whenever we get the opportunity to come back for some more greatness. But as always, this was a pleasure, bro, and I thank you for her talking about and just playing Trails, dude. Like, I'm so glad that you're going through the journey. So
my pleasure.
Excited for all of the greatness there. But yeah, man, definitely can't wait to play Apollo Justice myself. It'll be very, very soon on my end too. How are you enjoying that, by the way? Just one quick last thing.
Oh, it's tons of fun. We've done a couple of streams, and I think I'm a decent bit into it. But yeah, it's very nostalgic and classic Ace Attorney fun. And there's some cool twists that I think you'll really like when you get to it.
Sweet. All right. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will be out of here. Thank you so much for watching. As always, make sure to check out AJ, and please watch that Rebirth video. He's been working on it all year. 9 hours, man. Well, you heard it here first, folks. 9 hours, man. Let's go. So definitely looking forward to that, and of course for our discussion on Arcane and all of those other things when the time comes. So all love to you, my brother, and all love to everybody in the chat who's going to be watching this, and this also monster of a video. I appreciate everybody who's still here, and for all the Trails fans who are just like me, always looking for more Trails content. So definitely follow Alexander on Twitter for or whatever it's called now, for more updates on the Trails of Greatness as well. Whenever he finishes the game, he posts his thoughts. So that's always a good way to look to see what he's feeling about the games. So I will see all of y'all next time. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.